Just wasn't sure whether we wanted to share all the passwords.
Oh, good news, it's a one-time password over here.
Okay, good.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the continuation of the City of Waterloo Special Council meeting of Monday, May 31st, 2021. And let me start off with apologies for the abrupt ending as we had to recess in the afternoon. We tried to push through as much as we could, but eventually had to take the dinner break. And then apologies to our other delegations and guests who are here for later items that we thought we'd get to in the afternoon. We had certainly a lot of extra interest in the Transform Waterloo Region program, which was approved this afternoon, so that is great news, but apologies for the delay in making it to tonight on the other topics. So with that, we are going to continue on with item 11B, which is Union Street East reconstruction. And I believe we were going to go, and I'll ask my councillors to correct me if I'm wrong, probably to Councillor Bodley, who's going to comment, but I know Councillor Bonagor was ready to move forward on this. I'll go with Councillor Bonagor. Do you want to go to other councillors, Councillor Bodley, and then move forward?
I do have a couple of questions for staff, Mayor. If Councillor Bodley has questions, please feel free to go forward with those, and then I can follow up with my questions and go from there.
Yeah, and to Councillor Bodley, if your comments is on the motion, which Councillor Bonagor will eventually bring forward as the ward councillor, do you want to go on after the motion's moved, or after Councillor Bonagor now?
I have a comment that may morph into a question. I don't care which order we go.
Okay, we're going to go with Councillor Bonagor's questions, then we'll go with Councillor Bodley, and then we'll come back to the ward councillor to take us forward. Thank you. Please go ahead, Councillor Bonagor.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Jaworski. I just wanted to address one point and then ask a couple of questions of staff. So the first point is just to address some comments that came up at the abrupt ending of our previous session. And I just really, on behalf of residents in Uptown, I really need to underscore the fact that cut-through traffic is a bane of Uptown neighbourhoods. Drivers trying to avoid traffic elsewhere tend to be frustrated drivers. And this creates a bad environment for vulnerable road users, and I believe would render those internal roads even less safe for cyclists of all abilities, as well as countless kids walking to and from Elizabeth Ziegler School, which is directly in that neighbourhood as well. So I just cannot speak strongly enough against allowing that to happen. So I'll get to my questions. So for staff, the delegates have brought up the question of turn radii at King and Union. Is that part of the design process that will, the very detailed design process, and is there potential for those user concerns to be factored into that design process?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, yes, it is. There are a number of factors that are considered in determining corner radii, and all turning radii throughout the whole project will be looked at during the detailed design phase.
Okay, that's great to hear. Thank you. And my other question is just regarding that intersection at King. There are a number of constraints on it right now. You've been quite clear about those in previous meetings, but I'm just wondering, the city is going through a lot of change. Those lands are zoned for more than they currently hold. As these properties around that intersection are developed, I mean, how could the picture of that intersection change over the coming years?
We don't know. The answer is we don't know until such time as the...
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. We've developed the concepts based on the current conditions. If redevelopment were to occur, the city could look at the opportunities and constraints at that time, but the timelines for this are unknown.
I understand that. I'm sorry, and I wasn't asking anything that I could hold you to, like as a firm plan. I suppose I could rephrase that. Given that some of the constraints as they exist right now depend on the physical form of the buildings at that intersection, should in the future those be redeveloped, does that open the opportunity to kind of reassess this intersection?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, yes, it does. If additional space becomes available, then yes, it does open up new possibilities.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Those are the questions I had for staff. And as I said, I'm ready to move, but if Councillor Bodley wants to go first, then that is totally fine as well.
Absolutely. We'll get Councillor Bodley on board right now. Please go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you, Mayor Jaworski. And through you, I guess maybe I will ask a question first. What are can staff advise council as to what happens if we experience the scenario that the delegates are suggesting to us is going to happen, as happened on King Street with respect to the roll curbs? I know that the delegate referenced that that every roll curb experiences parking challenges. Personally, I've never seen a car parked on Columbia Street where we have roll curb bike lanes. And I take that road almost every day, or at least I did. But if we are to experience the issues that we experienced on King Street, is there the potential to retrofit and put up the type of infrastructure that was put in place on King Street to prevent cars from parking?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. Yeah, we don't expect those issues to occur in this particular context, and the issues are definitely context specific. The current design you would not be able to retrofit it after the fact. You would need to ensure ahead of time that you designed with that in mind for the future, as the tolerances on the design are quite narrow, and there would not likely be enough space to retrofit it in after the fact.
Okay, thank you. And as a follow-up then, is it staff's opinion that ignoring the constraints that we have in place that we are all working towards with respect to snow clearing on bike lanes, is it staff's opinion that implementing a non-roll curb bike lane is feasible given the space constraints in the parts of the design that are shown as roll curb today?
To you, Mayor Jaworski, the design would probably need to be altered a little bit. OTM Book 18 guidance has certain requirements for having a barrier curb adjacent to the cycle track, such as additional space and the possibility of cyclists falling off the curb. So that would need to be looked at during detailed design.
Okay, thank you. And I guess my comment that may morph into a question is I fully struggle with precisely what the delegate mentioned to us about approving Transform WR, speaking to the fact that most trips are active transportation with robust transit support, and then building something that is not going to that by staff's sort of confirmation that isn't AAA cycling infrastructure. It's not all ages and abilities. It's only super confident cyclists who are going to take the lane right out to King Street. I recognize and I appreciate the idea that we could ask the cyclists that are not as comfortable doing that to take the lower stress roads, but we never ask cars to do that. We always find the way to build the infrastructure. And I'm really struggling with this, and I recognize that it's a lot better than what it is today. But I guess my question is, through the lens or context of Transform WR that we just approved, through the lens and context of the TMP that we just approved, that sees this as a valuable and important active transportation corridor, have staff come to the conclusion that it is simply not feasible, short of an $11 million investment in land acquisition, that there's nothing we can do to make this AAA cycling infrastructure?
To you, Mayor Jaworski, the Transform Waterloo Region and TMP documents are aspirational policy documents that don't get into the detailed engineering of certain, of all the different aspects. And staff believe that this current design is a significant improvement over the current conditions.
And do staff believe, short of spending $9 to $11 million, that there is no method of extending any sort of separated cycling infrastructure from Mary to King?
Mary to King.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, it's Dan Toronto. I'll just jump in on this one if I can. To follow on what Gavin said, we have looked at this in as much detail as we can at this time through the concept. I would probably stop short of saying an absolute hard no on that, but at this point, we're not confident that it would be feasible. A race cycle track is considered a separated facility, and it does meet at a high level the goals and objectives of Transform Waterloo Region as well as the TMP. And as I said, we're not confident that it would be feasible. It's something that we certainly can commit to look further into when we do get to the detailed design stage. It's just that we're so constrained that we would have to look at some very excruciating details to really make that determination, and it's not something that we can, 100% do right now. As I said, having said that, though, we aren't necessarily confident, but certainly commit to follow up on that through the detailed design, understanding that that's, a concern and a wish that council has. And I think, if there's a way to make it happen, we will. But at this time, we've put forward what we're confident with, and need to move forward further to understand really fully where we would be able to go or not through the design process.
Excellent. Thank you for the clarification, Dan. Appreciate it. And thanks, Gavin, as well. Back to you, Mayor Jaworski.
Councillor Bodley, and just before we go to Councillor Bonagor to move us forward, Councillor Vasek had one last question. Please go ahead.
Thanks. Also, Royce, or Councillor Bodley, I like how you're more like a reporter now. Back to you, Mayor Jaworski. I like that. So Dan, then, is what you're saying that for clarity, I'm not interested in making roads less safe anywhere in the city. So my point around rerouting was, cities reroute things, change the roads all the time. So my curiosity there was more about, because it's already traffic calmed on the other streets, and should there not be traffic, like too much traffic, or if it wouldn't be unsafe, is that an option? So just to clarify that I am not wanting to make roads less safe in the city. And so is what you're saying, Dan, that you might actually consider that in the detailed design, removing the right lane? Is that what you just said, for my better understanding, and look at other options to see if that's feasible? Should it be safe? Is that what you said?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. We have been looking at it to date, both engineering staff and transportation staff, as well as our, I'll call it trifecta, I guess, of consultants that are involved. So again, we've come to the recommendations that we have at this time based on what we know. And, you know, with anything related to the intersection at King, as Gavin has alluded to, we would need to do some further work on that, both through the detailed design and also with the region. So I guess in a lot of these things, certainly willing to follow up and you know, consider them further based on council's comments. And we've recommended what we have at this point based on what we're confident in at this point. And again, beyond that, we would really need to get through the detailed process to understand further what the possibilities and alternatives might be further. But as I said, we've recommended based on what we're confident in at this point. And I would say, you know, there may be some tweaks that may be feasible. We don't expect major differences or changes to necessarily come out of this at this point. Having said that, you know, through the detailed process, we will look at, you know, any secondary options that might be available and work with the region where we can on some of these things for sure. And with the consultants and the experts that, you know, look at all the aspects that are necessary to review both for cyclists, motorists, pedestrians, you know, the full gamut of all users.
Okay, great. Thanks for clarifying.
And thank you, staff, for answering all the questions. And just for, I will be turning over to Councillor Bonagor now, but I know Councillor Bonagor has done a ton of work on this alongside staff in investigating all options. Well, staff have investigated all options, and I know Councillor Bonagor has certainly been on top of things. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Councillor Bonagor.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski. You're giving me more credit than is due. I've just been poking my nose in as we go along. But I plan to move the motion. Just would like to make a little comment first. I mean, as staff have outlined, this is a piece of the puzzle, and it will change and improve over time as it connects to other infrastructure. But for now, like, this is work that needs to get done. And what we have before us, it will be a considerable improvement on what exists now. So I really encourage staff to keep looking for and to implement as many protective measures on the cycle lanes as possible, and for bylaw to, you know, explore ways to kind of support their work and monitor the infrastructure should that become necessary. But with those, you know, minor comments, I move the motion as printed and vote in favour.
Thank you, and we'll look for a seconder, say from your quote neighbor in Ward 1.
Thank you. Councillor Henmer, I'm happy to second the motion and also vote in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Reeth in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Bassick in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too. That carries unanimously. Thank you very much to the engineering team for leaving no stone unturned and trying to figure out how we can do things effectively and yet cost effectively, because for every dollar we spend extra on certain things means the dollar we can't spend elsewhere as well. So thank you very much for that and taking a second look. So thank you to the advisors as well. With that, we'll move on to item C, RFT 21-07, Award of Tendering and Funding Release. Report prepared for us by Chris Dedman, and it's regarding station area planning, the Beautiful Market Trail Stage 2, and other trails as well, multi-use paths. Any questions? I'm seeing none, and so I will look to Councillor Freeman.
Thank you, through Mayor Jaworski. I just want to say how excited I am that the Market Trail project has come forward. It's like a dream, because if council will remember, staff had said that there wasn't funding for that trail and that was going to have to wait, and here it is. And what a great connection that's going to provide for users of the higher order transit and access to the market. So I'm very excited about these improvements, and I'm happy to move the motion and vote in favor.
And I guess I could actually go back one ward to the ward where the Beautiful Market Trail will be, Ward 3, if you consider seconding it.
Yes, absolutely. Happy to second this motion and vote in favor. And I also know that the companies, a lot of the tech companies that have moved in back there that use public transit are going to be very happy about this too. So yes, thank you for bringing this forward.
Okay, over to Ward 5.
Councillor Bassick in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favor.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too. That carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Chris, for waiting along for us and coming back tonight. Thank you. Next up, long-awaited item D, recreational backyard / community fires review. A report prepared for us by Nicole Papka. I do not believe Nicole has a presentation tonight. And so with that, do you have any opening remarks, Nicole, or Mark, just before we move into delegations? Otherwise, I'll go straight to delegations.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski. I do just have a brief overview of the report, if that's permitted.
Absolutely. Please go ahead, Nicole.
Okay. Yeah, good evening, Mayor Jaworski, members of council, CMT, the delegations, and the public. I'm just going to do a brief overview on the report for recreational fires and sort of how, as a group, we came to form the recommendations. So consultation was conducted with several members of the community, both those who wanted backyard recreational fires and those that would rather see the current bylaw remain. Fire rescue services, community programming and outreach, and environment, parks and services, along with myself at Municipal Enforcement Services, looked at a municipal scan, sort of looked at the public fire safety and risks, community engagement, and the implications to enforcement and fire services. So the recommendation sort of centered around three themes. The first being public safety and public health concerns. Our current bylaw permits outdoor appliances that meet the requirements of the TSSA and are fueled by propane and natural gas. These appliances eliminate some of the public health concerns, such as smoke and the types of material burned, as well as fire and life safety issues. They further eliminate the concerns of the health concerns that we were advised of for those with respiratory issues. They also bring down some of the nuisance concerns that are often associated with open burns. The second piece that we looked at was our neighborhood strategy here in the city of Waterloo. It's a focus on inclusion and equity and a focus on being neighborly and helping neighbors. So the neighborhood strategy heard that residents were interested in having campfires as part of neighborhood events. After consultation with various partners, the program was developed and implemented in late 2019 to allow for campfires in community parks. This program at the time was in its beginnings. Several bookings were made, and then, of course, they were halted due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Discussions to have this program were evaluated and expanded. The last piece that we looked at were the enforcement considerations and the fiscal responsibility. Should backyard fires be permitted, the current staffing model in municipal enforcement services would not support this program unless additional staff were available to respond to any complaints and concerns that would be generated as a result of backyard recreational fires. We currently respond to about 86 recreational fire complaints per year, and the expectation and belief is that that would be considerably higher if the bylaw was amended, and this is based somewhat on Kitchener's numbers. The piece with this type of complaint is the expectation from the public that there would be an immediate response to this type of complaint rather than a follow-up at a later date. And that is what I have tonight. Thank you.
Very much, Nicole, and the team and communications for working on this and coming back again so quickly, well beyond the expectations of council and closer to the expectations of citizens. So well done in these COVID times. Does anybody have any questions for Nicole? Prior to us going to delegates, you will have time after the delegates to ask questions of Nicole. And please go ahead, Councillor Bodley.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Jaworski. Nicole, I'm wondering if you could maybe speak a little bit to, within the report, it suggests that on that last piece, the enforcement/fiscal piece, that there would be $430,000 per year cost associated with this, and it references 2 enforcement officers, 1 fire prevention officer, a clerical person, a vehicle, equipment, and training. And I certainly agree with you entirely that I would strongly anticipate that there would be significantly more fire complaints if we were to amend the bylaw. I'm wondering if you can speak to whether your thoughts, how you came to the conclusion that 2 enforcement officers will be needed to be able to handle these types of calls, first off. And secondly, I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit more to why a fire prevention officer is required in order to support these enforcement calls.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. Thanks, Councillor Waterloo. I will speak to the requirement for the municipal enforcement officers, and I believe Chief Heptich is here as well and can speak to the fire prevention officer. So in terms of the 2 sort of municipal enforcement officers, they would be 2 part-time officers. The considerations that we noted, and we had sort of looked, we were fortunate at the time, Shane was still here, and he had worked for quite some time on Kitchener's prior to coming to Waterloo. And one of the pieces where the complaints typically centered around sort of the Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, where they're condensed into those. So Kitchener receives about 300 complaints per year. Whether the fires are permitted or not, there are just varying complaints, and the complaints that they provided to us didn't indicate whether or not they were in compliance or not. And typically they're condensed into that time. So that would be where we would require those 2 officers to follow up with those calls and be readily available to attend to it, in addition to the other calls we receive on those nights, such as noise and so forth. And I don't know if Chief Heptich, you're available to speak to the fire prevention piece.
Sorry, Chief, I'm gonna interrupt you for a second because I'm gonna have a quick follow up to Nicole on that before I hear from you on the FPO piece. Sorry. Just for clarity then, these enforcement officers, the 2 part-time enforcement officers, this is all they would do, or primarily what they would do? Or would this have any impact on our ability to respond to other enforcement issues that come up either positively or negatively, particularly on those Thursday to Saturday timeframes?
Sure, of course. I mean, we would have them available for the fires. However, they would be responding to other matters such as noise and other bylaw calls as required as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Sorry for cutting you off there, Chief Heptich.
Oh.
That's okay. Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Bodley. Thank you for the question. I want to provide you some background information with respect to why the fire prevention officer, understanding that there's been a number of follow-up on this particular question, and in particular, there's been a lot of discussion in the media as well. I want to start by sharing with council, the delegates, and citizens that the fire department, Waterloo Fire Rescue, works in accordance, by and large, as this Ontario Fire Marshal identifies, the strategic optimization of the 3 lines of defense. And that's how we really conduct the essence of our work. It includes 3 key areas, with the first being the starting point is public fire safety education. That's legislated under the Fire Protection and Prevention Act. Part B to the 3 lines of defense is fire safety standards and enforcement, as in the fire code and of course the FPPA. Part C, or really part 3 of the 3 lines of defense, is emergency response by fire rescue services, and that could mean a fire, injury, or loss. We always try to focus on the prevention lens and education to avoid the enforcement of standards, and of course, at all costs, we want to avoid an emergency response, albeit, of course, we are prepared, but by education and information through the first 2 lines of defense, that's where we want to have the greatest impact and believe that we can. The work that's conducted by fire prevention staff in this context, namely parts 1 and 2, is conducted by staff that are assistants to the fire marshal. And this includes our fire prevention team to ensure fire safety standards as defined and interpreted by staff and legal where required are upheld. Work is also contractual as per the collective agreement. I further note that Fire Services wants to not only maintain but significantly enhance existing process to approve open burning should council direct staff accordingly. And I note that this is in alignment as a starting point with the existing bylaw. And there's a number of features to this to meet Fire Services' mission that states we attempt to shape a fire-safe community. We can achieve this with such a role, again, if council directs accordingly, to provide public education, fire safety, application support, application approvals, inspections, and appeals, corporate integration, a deeper corporate integration, if you will, with bylaw, neighborhoods, parks, legal, and enforcement is required. That's another component of this with respect to, and also responding to complaints. And we see in the report there's evidence of complaints, not only in our community, but also surrounding communities as well. It goes hand in hand with any piece of legislation. And again, if we go back to the 3 lines of defense, we want to avoid an emergency response. This position can also be a voice for the community and neighbors who have concerns about their individual and family safety, their health and wellness, community safety by and large, and again, complaints because not everyone is completely comfortable with citywide open burning, whether it be that they are in favor of. Some have identified concerns as identified in the report, and those that may not be in favor. So I appreciate the question, Councillor. Happy to answer additional questions, and hope that this helps understanding the request for staff should Council designate staff accordingly.
Very much greatly appreciated. Thank you. And back to you, Mayor Jaworski.
To me, thank you very much. That's great for voice for radio there. We do have a couple more questions in the queue for after the delegations. But with that, I will ask our Deputy Clerk to invite in our first delegate, who will have 10 minutes, William Anderson of Waterloo.
Okay, thank you, and good evening, Mayor and Councillors, for this opportunity to provide some input into this discussion. And this will be based on my approximately 30 years of experience in teaching and research in the area of air pollution and air pollution control. Next slide. My goal today is really just to provide the scientific background and some context in this discussion. And to do that, give a very brief overview or summary of some of the scientific literature related to the air quality impacts of open burning and what one might expect if one goes down that route. Next slide. So it's without doubt that open burning of wood or any other solid fuel for that matter generates a number of pollutants that get emitted. The main mechanism is essentially related to the fact that open burning is not a very efficient combustion condition, and so you get all sorts of things like black carbon, polyaromatic hydrocarbons, etc. And you can see in the slide the health concerns be attributed to those. The thing I would like to focus on today to keep things sort of focused and simple is another emission, which is particulate matter. Next slide. And I'm going to focus specifically on fine particulate matter. And this is technically called PM 2.5, which means that it's particles with a size less than about 2.5 micrometers. The illustration shows that that's quite small. It's about 1/100th of a human hair diameter. Another way of looking at it is it's roughly the size of a bacteria or smaller. And the literature suggests that when you have open burning of wood, you generate about 10 grams of these particles per kilogram of wood being burned. Now that varies depending on the type of wood and the state of the wood, how wet and dry it is, etc. But that's sort of a good ballpark figure. Next slide. When it comes to this fine particulate matter, or PM 2.5, over the last number of decades, there has been quite a bit of research into it, and there have been identified a number of health concerns related to exposure to it. As you might expect, there's impaired lung function, and there are issues with heart disease, etc. There's also some interesting other impacts. There are associations with diabetes or insulin resistance. There are associations with low birth weight, preterm birth, abnormal immune system development, etc. And in the last decade or so, there's been quite a bit more literature coming out associating exposure to this fine particulate with neurological impacts such as stroke, dementia, autism spectrum disorder, Parkinson's disease, etc. So this is kind of an ongoing area of research, but it is building quite rapidly and significantly. The World Health Organization has looked at this over the years and has attributed exposure to this fine particulate with about 4 million annual premature deaths globally, and there will be some number associated with Canada too. Next slide. One question is, where does all this fine particulate come from? And I use this slide in classes, and students are often kind of surprised to learn that home firewood burning is in fact one of the major sources of emissions of fine particulate in Canada. This data is for Ontario specifically. The biggest source is dust, which includes construction activities and driving on unpaved roads. But in terms of things that you kind of do, whether it's manufacturing or etc., in a smaller area, the home firewood burning represents about 18% of the total emissions in Ontario. Next slide. In terms of air quality, the World Health Organization recommends that the fine particulate concentrations shouldn't exceed around 25 micrograms per cubic meter on a 24-hour average. Canada's target, I believe, currently is about 27, so it's similar. The US is somewhere around that too. For interest, I looked up the 1 year of information from the Air Quality Monitoring Station in Kitchener. There isn't one in Waterloo. Kitchener is the closest one. And we're fortunate that in Waterloo region, we have pretty good air quality in terms of particulate matter. The median value is around 7, but it does range from 1 up to about 23, at least in this 1 year. And it's interesting to point out that those higher values tend to occur in the fall and winter. You might conclude that there is some connection with firewood burning, not only in the backyard, but also in stoves and fireplaces. However, I don't have that sort of connection well documented. Many jurisdictions, including Canada, have been looking at lowering the targets on sort of a slow but steady basis, because the scientific literature suggests that there is really no safe level for exposure to fine particulate matter. And so there is a concern and a tendency to try to push the numbers down or improve air quality further as best as we can. The other thing to say about the fine particulate matter is that unlike the denser, heavier particles in smoke that you can kind of see, this matter doesn't settle out easily. It's so small that it remains suspended in the air. And so it can be transported for fairly long distances in the air. And we've seen as a sort of an example, wildfires, for example, on the West Coast having impacts here on the East Coast, or farther east at least, as that material is transported. Next slide. And again, just to put things in context with an example, based on sort of the numbers the literature suggests, if we had a fire with 10 kilograms of wood being burned, it would generate perhaps about 100 grams of this fine particulate. And in terms of how much could that pollute, if we picked the sort of 25 micrograms per cubic meter upper limit, that one fire could pollute 4 million cubic meters of air up to that concentration. That's kind of even hard to visualize. So to try and visualize it, that's equivalent to 1,600 Olympic swimming pool volumes, or roughly 8,000 typical houses, the volume of air in each house added up. So it doesn't take a whole lot of wood burning to pollute a fair amount of air, is the bottom line. Next slide. So I just wanted to provide this input from a science perspective to say that wood burning does degrade air quality through this fine particulate and the other pollutants, which I haven't gone into detail on. The fine particulate is a recognized health hazard, and there are efforts across North America, Europe, Asia, etc., to try to lower the ambient concentrations. And so when one looks at making decisions on policy, one should probably weigh air quality factors into those decisions. Next slide. In this presentation work, there's just a few of the references used. However, I will say that this is like a tiny fraction. If you look at the actual scientific literature, there are literally thousands of papers related to this topic. Next slide. And so that's all I wanted to say today, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Excellent, Bill. Thank you very much for your time. Always good to have to take advantage of our universities in town and have presentations and a mini lecture, so to speak. I will have a question for you, but first up is Councillor Vasek. Please go ahead.
Thanks, through you, Mayor Jaworski. Yeah, I echo that comment. It's nice to have university professors doing their knowledge mobilization in different forums, not just conferences and amongst other academics. So I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. My question for you is if in the research they note any differences between wood burning in indoor stoves versus outdoor fires.
I didn't look very deeply at that particular question. There is quite a bit of literature on indoor air quality being degraded by burning wood in stoves, in houses, etc. Looking at it comes down to partly of the stove design. There has been over the last number of years a push for better stove designs with emission control systems on them. And so that would be a sort of a better option than an old stove. Whether that's better than open burning, it probably depends a bit on the nature of the stove and also the nature of how the open burning is done. There's ways of building fires such that they smolder more and probably produce more pollutants versus building a fire which is much more well constructed and in better efficiency, but no, I haven't looked into that particular detail.
Well, that was still helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And my question is about the fine particulate matter and smoke and the smell from a campfire, from a backyard fire. And you mentioned fine particulate matter can travel very far. So when a person is smelling, say, smoke from a campfire nearby, and often you can't really see where the fire is that the fine particulate matter, or is that the heavy elements of smoke? I'm just wondering, how much further than the smell does the fine particulate matter go, or is that what you're smelling?
That's a good question. The fine particulate matter definitely goes much farther than you can smell it. And the smell will be a combination of a number of things, particulate matter, probably also some volatile organic compounds, which are kind of partially combusted organics coming out of the wood and floating around. Yeah, it's a combination, but the fine particulate matter is so small that typically it wouldn't add much to the smell.
Okay, thank you. And then if we were to compare wood burning versus propane, just with respect to fine particulate matter, because we do allow natural gas and propane-based appliances, what's the generation comparison there?
I don't have a specific number for you, but the propane and natural gas will be much lower in fine particulate matter. I would suspect orders of magnitude lower.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I would have thought that. I just didn't want to guess since we had you on the line. Councillor Reeth has a question for you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Jaworski, and thank you for coming. So someone has told me that there's like new technology out there that completely removes smoke from open burns, and there's this one product called Solo Stove. Do you know anything about that? With the smoke removed, would there still be particulate matter being breathed in by folks? Thanks.
I'm not familiar with that concept. The fine particulate matter is quite difficult to remove. In fact, from an industrial emission control point of view, that's the worst thing that you have to deal with. It's quite difficult. You end up with fairly large and fairly expensive equipment to get rid of that. So I can't see that sort of something that you would set up in your backyard would be able to remove the fine particulate. It may knock out sort of the visible black large particles, bursts of smoke, but not, I would doubt the fine particulate.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
And I do believe that is all that's all the questions for you at this time. So thank you very much for weighing in, taking the time, and again, apologies for the delay this afternoon.
Thank you.
I'll ask our Deputy Clerk to let in our next delegate, and let me just go back here. It is resident of Waterloo, Laura Bannon.
Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you now. Please go ahead.
Okay, awesome. Good afternoon, Mayor, or good evening, I guess, Mayor Jaworski, councillors, and everyone else on the call. I'm a long-term resident of the city of Waterloo, and I'm here to kind of add my voice. I do support and have set up for a backyard fire similar to Kitchener's bylaw. I also hope to give a different perspective to those who didn't or don't support backyard fires. I believe homeowners and landlords in cooperation with tenants should have the freedom and the choice to use outdoor heat for pleasure or to cook. In fact, we're already doing that. There's been much discussion about the different types of fueling of heat cooking apparatuses. So I'm not referring to people who have had them kind of underground. I'm talking about barbecue smokers, propane heaters, and any outdoor cooking or heating device that requires the lighting of fire, including propane gas, charcoal, and wood. It seems kind of an arbitrary distinction to allow some kinds of backyard fires and rule out others. I think we can also bring up the point about indoor fire inserts. We actually have one in our home, and I know others do in our neighborhood. I smell them. So I guess that was brought up earlier. It's been, in my mind, I'm an operations manager in HVAC, and, you know, given power outages and stuff, to have that backup source of heat is critical in certain times of the year. And it's a great backup for heating if the power is out. I understand that they all have emissions. I just wanted to bring up the point that emissions from burning propane or gas in your backyard can't just be looked at what's coming out of that barbecue. It's also the biggest the biggest piece of emissions is extracting the gas or propane to get and then transporting it to cities and such. So it's not just what's happening, a wood burning appliance versus a gas or propane. It's all of that production and transportation to get that to your door. So it doesn't really reflect emissions as a whole picture in my view. And, you know, I've studied obviously the bylaw in Kitchener. You know, they take a measured approach to allow fires under strict conditions, so they're not too close to neighboring properties, and they have rules in place to prevent excessively large or smoky fires. And I believe we should model their bylaw. And I realize not everybody has the space to have a fire mirroring those setback requirements or having a pool. You know, with that bigger, larger property, obviously it's got to be ideal. You know, it also comes with more maintenance. We pay more taxes, and we also invite our friends or family, such as my 3 daughters, to come and see us outside. You know, with the indoor gatherings being restricted, and you know, we don't know how long that will be in place. So I think the pandemic has truly highlighted the importance of, you know, of gathering outdoors. We may have really warm conditions a lot of the summer, but there's the spring and the fall that, or even some summer nights that it would allow us to have our right now 5 or less people not living in the same household to gather outdoors and stay warm if need be. You know, I wanted to mention Canada Parks website actually has outlined the positive benefits of spending time with nature. And I don't think, you know, I mean, even being out in the backyard has been more, you know, kind of more desirable than it is now, you know, because we've got porches and such, but we can't maintain that distance. So being outside in the open space would be really advantageous. So I really strongly encourage, and I realize, you know, from what I've seen so far, maybe we don't have enough information so far. I saw one of the options, maybe doing a pilot project. I also think, and I think when I filled out the survey, community fires, I do believe someone's got to be responsible for that, whether that be a homeowner or a resident or a landlord. I wouldn't be opposed to you know, applying for a permit, getting, you know, specific education on the safety of backyard fires. You know, I think it's gathering outside would give a lot more time for myself, my family, friends, neighbors to meet outside safely during this particular time and going forward. Thank you.
Very much, Laura, for your presentation. I'll just pause a moment while I look to see if any councillors put up their hands for questions for our delegate tonight. I'll turn over to Councillor Bonagor. Please go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Jaworski. Thank you, Laura. I don't have a question. I just wanted to thank you for coming tonight. I know we spoke at length previously, but I really appreciate you holding on the line and waiting until this evening to kind of have your say. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Laura. I'll ask the Deputy Clerk to bring in our next delegate, our final delegate, I think. And with 10 minutes, it's resident of Waterloo, Ryan Hammer.
Thank you very much for having me. Honorable Mayor, council members, and city staff, thank you so much for having me here today. First of all, I want to thank the city staff for creating a report in a timely manner. It's been an absolute thrill being involved and hearing from so many wonderful citizens of Waterloo on how much they really do care about backyard burns and how we can really safely enjoy them in our own backyards. Like Laura, today I want to bring the attention of council the voice of the people. Since I started the idea of backyard fires, I've had hundreds of people reach out to me and ask, why are we not allowed to have legal fires in our backyard? We started with a petition of over 7,000 people, but council didn't think it was a legitimate survey, so the city put out their own. From that survey, 2,500 residents, more than often vote in elections, responded. The survey speaks for itself, with 2,500 responses and 80% in favor of backyard burns. Many of the 80% want to include restrictions, fees, and guidelines. Even though the petition, the letters, and the survey are in favor of backyard burns, it still appears the city will not listen to the citizens of Waterloo on this topic. When looking at the options provided, referencing option B, this is not what the citizens of Waterloo have asked for. They want to have fires in their backyards, where they can sit with family, friends. Community fires have no access to bathrooms, and drinking in public could become an issue. There was no option considered where people would pay a registration fee and agree to the guidelines which would decrease the cost to the city. We would like the city to consider this. By providing a registration system, the city of Waterloo will know where and who are having fires. We know that people are already having them. Why can't these great citizens do so in a legal manner? Why can't it be controlled? And the cost mitigated by way of registration system. Backyard fires actually help support the city of Waterloo's strategic objectives of equity and inclusion and a sense of belonging. Help with environmental sustainability, keeping propane tanks out of our landfill, and create a healthy communities and resilient neighborhoods. During a pandemic and some of the economic downfall that families have experienced, this is the only entertainment for most families that is an affordable way to spend time together, getting outside and away from screens and relying on the internet. Sharing family time with one another by warmth of a nice little controlled fire in our backyard is something that has been enjoyed since the beginning of time. So our plea is that council hears the voice and reacts to it. Thank you.
Thank you. I will just look to councillors for hands up for any questions. I see a couple for comments. Any questions first? And I don't see any questions, but I will go for comments to Councillor Reeth first, please. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Jaworski. I just want to say thank you so much, Ryan, for all the research that you've done on this, and in particular for your passion for family, for getting together, for all of those community thoughts that you have, and your love for this community and this city. So yeah, that's all. I just thank you for coming again tonight, and yeah, have a good evening.
Thank you, Ange. I will.
Next up, I have Councillor Vasek. Please go ahead.
Oh, thanks through you, Mayor Jaworski. Ryan, I was just going to say the same. Thanks so much for bringing this to the attention of council and for working on it and bringing residents together on it who are in support on that side, and all the time you took during the pandemic too. So not easy. Thanks so much.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. I don't see any further hands up from councillors. So again, thank you very much, as my two fellow colleagues have recognized you for your hard work on this.
Thanks, Mayor. Appreciate it.
With that, I do not see any further delegations registered, and I think there were some questions outstanding. So I had a couple that councillors who had their hands up earlier, and for questions of staff. And so I have Councillor Reeth and Councillor Hammer.
Thank you. Through you again, Mayor Jaworski. This is a question, well, I guess for bylaw. So what would be a fine if somebody in the neighborhood had a backyard fire in these conditions, like right now, and a neighbor called, bylaw came, what would be the fine? And my follow-up to that is, what if the homeowner wanted to appeal it? What would be the cost and details, please?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. I do apologize, I don't have my short form wordings handy. However, I believe the fine is over $100. However, it is a provincial offense, so any fine would have to go through the courts. I'm just looking for my short form wording here, so I do apologize for not having that handy for you. Sorry, through you, Mayor Jaworski. I just have one other comment, though, that typically, in response to a backyard fire, it is typically education first. The homeowners would be given a chance to put it out as opposed to a ticket immediately being issued. That would be something I think that would follow up with repeated calls to a residence, if that makes sense.
Okay. So I just have a follow-up because I sent this out over the weekend, but article like from the provincial fire code, it reads, open air burning shall not be permitted unless approved by the chief fire official, or unless such burning consists of a small confined fire supervised at all times and used to cook food on a grill or a barbecue. So that the word "or" in that sentence tells me that that the fire code allows a small confined fire that's supervised at all times. So and I just wonder how, I mean, so someone's sitting in their backyard with a nice confined fire going, and bylaw wraps on the door, and folks just go in and get their hot dogs or their steak or whatever they're gonna, say they're gonna cook on their contained fire or their confined fire in their backyard that's supervised. So I just wonder how that can stand up. Like, yeah. Maybe it's a rhetorical question. It's okay. Thanks.
Just to confirm, was that was a comment rather than a question? I think.
Yes. Yeah, I guess it was. I thought it might be a question, but.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Next up, I have Councillor Hanmer.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. First of all, thank you to the delegates who were here this evening and the information that they've provided to us. Particular thanks to Ryan and the work that he has done on behalf of the citizens who have been interested in this particular issue, and to staff for looking at different options and some considerations. A couple of my questions were answered already. They were along the lines of Councillor Bodley's questions, so I won't repeat those. I do, though, still have some questions. I've got 3 questions altogether. The first is really about option C. You included an option of potentially doing a pilot, and throughout the report you talk about some restrictions that would need to be put in place, which include education and perhaps a permit, those kind of things. But yet there isn't really, I'm struggling a little bit with making the conclusion to why this particular option, or doing a pilot of some period of time with the restrictions, was not considered. It just seems to drop flat. So I wondered whether through to Nicole or to Chief Heptage, if you could elaborate a little bit more on why staff is discounting doing a pilot.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. Thank you, Councillor Hanmer. I think we opted against recommending a pilot, sort of based on the 3 themes that I had discussed earlier, in terms of public health and public safety issues and risk management, and the nuisance issues, sort of the neighborhood strategy that the City of Waterloo has, and then of course the enforcement considerations and the fiscal responsibility related to to going through with the pilot. Those were sort of the factors that we considered related to whether we would recommend a pilot for council to consider.
Okay, and just maybe a corollary to that, you were looking at a 2-year pilot. Was there a rationale behind why 2 years as opposed to 1 or as opposed to 6 months?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, I think just in terms of it would take time to implement and potentially hire staff, and that would be why we would consider it for 2 years.
Okay, great, thank you. Still keeping along a little bit of that line, I'm just curious if we were to have some of the area restrictions. We've heard from one of the delegates tonight to model the Kitchener bylaw, and we've always tried to look at making our decisions that we are inclusive as best we can be and are benefiting the whole rather than a few. Would you have any insight or any information on the percentage of Waterloo properties that would be in compliance if we were to use either the Kitchener restrictions or the Cambridge restrictions?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, the Cambridge restrictions are 150 meters from any building, so I don't know that they would actually be a good comparator. With the Kitchener restrictions, it's 5 meters from property lines. So we were sort of able to, through GIS, maybe establish a little over a third, depending. The problem that would be is that you couldn't determine, or we couldn't determine quickly enough if there's a shed or a tree in the backyard, then that also would limit where you can put a fire pit in a backyard, and that is consistent with Kitchener as well.
Okay, and then presumably from that, thank you, Nicole, presumably from that, anyone that's living in apartment buildings, again, thinking on the inclusive side of things, that don't have backyards, that's where you're envisioning the community program would come into play?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, that certainly would be a part of it as well, yes. Although the neighborhood groups also had, like the neighborhood associations and groups had also requested community fires as well as a way to bring neighbors together.
And in the locations and areas that they have as common areas.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, actually that was within our parks. So okay. Even those that potentially had homes that could have their own fires had asked. I can ask Jim actually Bowman to speak to that as well.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Nicole. It's Jim here. Yes, the intent of the campfire program was event driven, so that neighborhoods could have, let's say, a New Year's Eve party or a celebration, and they'd come together in an event. If a apartment building or a multi-level site would have the opportunity to have some get together, then they could use a community fire campfire program in order to facilitate that activity. But it would be in our parks, and our Parks Environment team have identified spaces that would allow us to have a safe and effective site.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that clarification. And my final question is a bit of a comment and a bit of a question too. We've heard lots about the mental health benefits and the mental health risks, as well as the respiratory health issues, as well as safety, the impact on the environment, and we've just gone through and supported Transforming Waterloo Region to look at how we are going to continue every little step to try to reduce our carbon footprint. And I'm struggling a little bit with the costs to run the program as well. So I'm curious about, this may be sort of a cost avoidance component related to the complaints that we've already had. What are the costs in responding to those?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. I don't know that I can definitively say the cost. We have staff that are currently working that would respond to those should we receive those complaints. And they're probably, like I mentioned, this past year was probably more being 64 complaints. I don't know if Richard wants to speak to any fire prevention issues that have resulted out of it.
Sure. Thank you, Nicole. Through you, Mayor Jaworski, Councillor Hammer, thank you for your question. I think, you know, if I understand your question, you're talking about the cost for response. And, you know, in this regard, I'm not sure that for fire services that's particularly measurable. I think on two fronts, with the first being operations, meaning that we have 4 fire stations, we have existing staff 24/7, 365 days of the year. And they are prepared to respond to any calls. So they are available. Where I would, you know, introduce the subjectivity of cost, if you will, is, you know, the cost of not being able to respond to a true emergency, meaning that someone calls 911. And if we're responding to a complaint, that's categorical as a nuisance call. I think where the greatest impact would be in this circumstance associated with cost, again, I'm not certain that I could put a dollar value on it, but specifically, and in contrast to a request for staff, should council direct staff to advance such a program, would be the cost of enhancing and adding to the backlog of existing and outstanding files for fire prevention. So that, in my view, is immeasurable, meaning that if we get a complaint, we have to respond to it. And with the existing staff and their current capacity, you know, there's a cost of compounding risk is really what I'm speaking to here. So again, you know, with respect to the dollar amount of things, difficult to indicate that in this regard, and hoping that this helps with the question that you do have in the cost of compounding risk.
Thank you, Chief Heptich. It does actually. I was trying to frame it in more of a cost avoidance, but it's not. That if we're putting money, if we're putting, it's all right. If we're putting money in one area, what's the risk to other parts? And you've answered my question in a much better way than I actually asked the question. So thank you. I appreciate that.
You're very welcome.
Mayor, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hanmer. And one last hand up, Councillor Vasic, please go ahead.
Thanks, through you, Mayor Jaworski. So I'm curious about the cost of the program, and there have been suggestions that if we could cover all the costs with the permit fees. So I'm curious if that's feasible. If you've sort of crunched numbers to figure out if so many households bought permits, it would cover the $430,000 or point, I forget the exact point percentage tax increase or tax impact. So yeah, just curious if you know how many households would need to get a permit, and then about how much that permit would cost, if you have a rough estimate or an exact.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, I did have a little bit of help from finance, so I appreciate all of that help. But it's sort of a little bit tricky to determine how many would maybe want to do the program. So we sort of based it on what eligible properties there were, and assuming that, let's say, 15% of the eligible properties decided to buy a recreational backyard fire license. So potentially that would maybe be 3,713 households, give or take, to buy a license, without that being guaranteed. And that is being somewhat, I would say, generous. If you were to look, let's say, at the survey, 2,400 people answered the survey, assuming they were all from different households, and 80% were in favor. So that would make about 1,900 or so people that maybe would want to have a fire. So putting that up to about 3,700 wouldn't seem unreasonable. But I think at that stage, to really kind of the cost of the permit, you know, based on that, to kind of cover what we're proposing we would need, would probably be around the neighborhood of $120, if that makes sense. And I don't know if it's a good comparator to look at maybe like dog licensing, for example, as a comparison. We looked at about, I think, based on, there's a few different fees for dogs based on whether your dog is spayed or neutered, and then seniors get a slightly different rate. So just guesstimating, we're probably issuing about 1,700 dog licenses per year, and I feel like there's probably more dogs than that. I don't know for sure, but would be my guess. So I don't know if that helps, Councillor Vasic. It's kind of rudimentary, and I sometimes feel, you know, trying to explain finances is not my forte entirely, but that was sort of a rough estimate we sort of did today.
No, that's great. I think that you explained it just fine, and I think it's hard to know exactly. So I think some generous guessing would be needed. Just something you brought up there made me wonder, do you know if everybody who signed the petition, maybe this is also a question for Ryan, but in Engage Waterloo, do you need to say that you're from Waterloo, or can anyone do it?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. I worked with Carrion Communications and filled out the survey. You self-answer whether you are or not, but you don't necessarily have to confirm.
Did most people answer? Like, was most everyone from Waterloo?
Yeah, I would say the majority indicated they were from Waterloo.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, I'm going to look to Councillor Freeman and Councillor Henry to put this motion on the floor so we can debate it.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Jaworski. As many of you know, I work full-time as an air quality engineer, and one of the things I do is look at land use compatibility and whether or not air emissions between land uses create a compatible situation for property owners. So under the Ontario Environmental Protection Acts, subsection 14(1) and 2, it specifically says a person shall not discharge a contaminant or cause or permit the discharge of a contaminant into the natural environment if the discharge causes or may cause an adverse effect, where an adverse effect is defined as impairment of the quality of the natural environment for any use, injury or damage to property or plant or animal life, harm or material discomfort to any person, an adverse effect on the health of any person, impairment of the safety of any person, rendering any property, plant, or animal life unfit for human use, loss or enjoyment of normal use of property, and interference with the normal conduct of business. This is what we hold others accountable to in our city. So I'm talking about some of our industry partners, like Pillars, like Valley Blades, and some other very large employment opportunities. We would also hold the university accountable to this from their fume hoods, from their laboratories. And so now we're talking about having some fun in our backyard. And I think that's great. And we have tools to have fun in our backyard with live fires, and those tools are through liquid petroleum sources, whether it's propane or natural gas. And we know that the emissions from those liquefied petroleum products will not cause degradation of our environment, and they will not cause the severe rendering of greenhouse gas emissions and continued degradation of our climate through climate change. I cannot, in good conscience, support any change to this bylaw that would effectively put our bylaw staff in the middle of an EPA injunction. And as somebody who has over time gone from having severe allergies to having a class 4 asthma, I can tell you without a doubt that it is related to the change in our environment and the continued reduction of quality of air. Respiratory health is very significant for many, many people. And yes, a lot of people answered that survey, but a whole lot more who have very significant health issues took a lot of time to send a lot of emails. And I have a huge number of emails from folks who are begging me. And I ask you this question to my colleagues who are thinking about this. When you sit around an open burn fire, maybe as a kid, maybe when you've gone camping, do you always sit on the downwind side of the fire, or are you quick to move when the smoke from that fire comes directly at your face? Because you see, when there's a homeowner who's downwind of that fire, they don't have the opportunity to move upwind, and all they can do is choose to close their windows, go inside, and try to find fresh air to breathe. And we don't put the kind of filters on our air intakes in our home to eliminate the impact, not just of PM 2.5, which we learned a lot about tonight, but also from the odor that's generated. And yes, the mayor was right to ask the question about odor, because that's related to typically to the volatile organics, toxic, typically volatile organics that are released during open burning of solid fuels. We have lots of opportunities for folks to enjoy their backyards, and burning fire is not one of them. And we already have an exemption in our bylaw as it relates to things like cooking devices, in particular smokers. So I don't see a need to change the bylaw for that matter. So I move the motion and I move the motion for the staff recommendation, and I vote in favor.
We aren't voting yet because I do know that people will have
Sure.
other input. We'll just get on the table to have the debate. So thank you, Councillor Freeman. Yeah, and over to Councillor Henry.
Councillor Henry here. I'm happy to second the motion. I'll offer my comments now in debate since it's properly on the floor. I know there are a lot of questions folks asked about how a pilot would work and the costs, and council asked about those. I'll reserve any comments I would have about that for if this motion fails, because if it fails, then there's an opportunity for council to introduce contrary direction to enable this, and that would be where I would save my comments for what a program would look like. In terms of the decision before us, I recognize that there are a large number of people who are wanting to have this opportunity legally, many of whom are already having it illegally, but that want that opportunity to have it legally. I understand that. I understand the desire to be outside with people. I understand the desire to inhabit an activity that I know there are so many positive memories many of us have with as we've grown up camping or what have you, and I get where that's coming from. I really do. But my obligation, sitting here as an elected official, thinking about everybody in the community and their needs, is to try to figure out what the appropriate balance would be here, and what the appropriate response would then be. So on the one hand, we have some very passionate folks that really want to have a fire in their backyard. It would be fun. It would bring people together who support that to enjoy each other's company. And on the other hand, we have people that really desperately need, in many cases, to have clean air. And I think Councillor Freeman has articulated with significant detail, as well as Mr. Anderson, what the impacts from permitting open burning in backyards would look like to many people who need to have clean air and can't escape being downwind. And so I feel that my obligation in looking at that balance and listening to those sides is to come down on the sides of needs over the side of wants. And that's to protect the health and safety and the ability for people to enjoy their backyards free from fine particulate air pollution, odor, and nuisance smells in this case. And that's I think the overriding issue for me in considering this very challenging issue where we have very passionate and interested parties on both sides.
Thank you, Councillor Henry. I see some hands going up now. Councillor Bonagor and I'll go from there. So Councillor Boniver, please go ahead.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Jaworski. First of all, I need everyone who's listening to know that this is not an easy issue. It may look like one, but it's really not. Over the past months, I've reached out and had lengthy discussions with people on both sides of this issue, and I've listened to their hopes. I've listened to their concerns. And this debate, it pits individual desire against community well-being, which is what makes it so tough. You know, with climate change, we listen to the science, and we need to listen to the science here too. So after weighing up all of the discussions I had, the emails I received, yes, there were a lot for, but there were also a heck of a lot against. After looking at the research and hearing from people across the ward and across the city, and a surprising number from Kitchener, I cannot support backyard fires. I definitely hear from people the need for stress relief. I hear about the need for mental health breaks. I hear the need for spending time together outdoors. You can do that without a wood-fueled fire, and by not producing smoke, your neighbours can too. So that's where I stand. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for your succinct wrap-up, and that was very good, Councillor Boniver. Councillor Reeth, then Councillor Hanmer, and more after that.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Jaworski. As most of you know, I will not be supporting this recommendation. I know people that have larger families that can't afford a cottage or a trailer or one of those big fire gas units for their backyard. So they have a small contained fire to sit around and enjoy each other's company. When I look at my ward wraps around Laurel Creek Conservation Area. I mean, there's trees all over the place. People are on a small postage stamp campsite, you know, with a tent and chairs that are flammable, and they enjoy campfires. It's hard to get my head around that. And then, you know, talking about air quality, gas-powered lawnmowers are horrible. They, you know, my neighbors fire them up at, you know, in the evenings when, you know, you're trying to sit around and you know, enjoy your deck or your backyard fire, and you're listening to that and smelling that as well. And I think, you know, back to our environmental, that we need to start with our gas guzzling vehicles and SUVs and those are and buildings. Those are the things where we can have a huge impact. I don't think that penalizing families in their backyards for having a small fire now and then is the way to go. And Kitchener's doing it. I can't understand why we can't model some rules after what Kitchener does. It seems to be working over there, but I have to say it hasn't been easy. You know, people are passionate on both sides of this topic. So yeah, for those reasons, I have to not support the staff report. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Next up is Councillor Hanmer, then Councillor Bodley.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski, through you. It's been said by my colleagues that this is not by any means an easy issue for us. There are passionate arguments and passionate considerations on both sides. I've also talked to many within my ward and through the city on both sides of this particular issue. And I keep coming back to, in my own mind, looking at the tenets of what we're trying to do as councillors and to keep our city safe. We need to look at not only the public safety component of it, but also the health and well-being. And I appreciate that by some of the suggestions, we could be improving and looking at and maintaining public safety. We can also look at the inclusion component by doing a number of different kinds of things. The enforcement considerations and what would need to go in place for that concern me from a cost standpoint ongoing, should we go there. But the one piece that I keep coming back to is the longer term health impacts of those who are already compromised or soon to be or could become compromised because of the burning of outdoor fires. And so that tips the scale for me in terms of where we move forward with this recommendation. And so I will be supporting the staff recommendation for the reasons predominantly of the longer term effects, the potential for the longer term effects on the health of our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hammer, for that. Next up, Councillor Bodley, then Councillor Bassett.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Jaworski. A lot of my colleagues have shared a lot of my thoughts on this, but I will share mine as well to have it on the record. I do want to take the time to thank all of the delegates and the folks who were pushing council to engage in this conversation. I can only share with people that I have had more sleepless nights contemplating this decision than most, and I have honestly done my level best to engage with everyone who is passionate about this topic and to get a sense of what the community is feeling on this topic. And honestly, my thoughts have shifted over time as I've engaged in these discussions. I really recognize how valuable enjoying your own private property is. I see the value in gathering with friends. I understand the benefits. I also recognize the limitations, how it prioritizes not only folks who have the privilege of having a backyard, but also folks that have large backyards. In my conversation with folks, there is a real concern around safety, and there is a real concern around neighborliness. We really only need to look to this past long weekend and the issues that all of us received pertaining to fireworks to understand that what you enjoy on your property is not always a mutual feeling shared by your neighbors, and in many cases can be actively harmful to their well-being. I am interested in the concept of more permanent fire pit infrastructure that we could build in large public parks that could be enjoyed safely by folks in the community. It is something that received overwhelmingly positive feedback among the community members that I spoke to on this topic, and I think that's an opportunity to mitigate some of the safety and nuisance concerns while creating an inclusive option that brings friends and neighbors together regardless of the size of their property. And I would support looking at approving a small budget increase to implement this. I cannot support the budget increase proposed to implement a private fire bylaw, and I recognize this is a divisive issue, and regardless of how we vote tonight, that roughly half of our constituents will not be happy. I just can't support a 0.5% tax increase to create a bylaw that is very likely to divide the community, increase confrontation, and benefit a small minority of households within the city. I am, however, placated by the fact that of the 26 cities in Ontario with a population greater than 100,000 people, the vast majority of them, 17, do not permit backyard fires within their urban settings under any circumstances. And frankly, it sucks. Like when this conversation started, I really honestly thought the conversation would be about enforcement, safety, students burning couches, nuisance concerns, these types of things. And while all those things are valid and have been discussed, what I did not initially envision when engaging in this discussion was the health and environmental concerns associated with burning wood in an urban setting. Many of the things that have been referenced by my council colleagues, and I won't repeat, except to state that the Canadian Lung Association, as well as the Canadian Council of Ministers of the Environment, both strongly recommend not permitting wood fires in an urban setting. Those are organizations, though, and a lot of the stuff we saw are reports. They can sometimes be easy to dismiss, but for me, these are the things that are impossible to dismiss. These are real people with real concerns for their health and safety. These are a few quotes of some of the emails that we've received as council. If the city allows backyard fires, our health situation will definitely become worse. It can feel like drowning when the air quality gets worse in the house as the night goes on, and much worse if we open windows. It has gotten to the point of ambulance calls, hospital runs, and tears of fear. And like I said, those are just a small summary of the pleas we've received from residents on this issue. I love fires, I really do, and I wanted to support them. I've got a lot of great memories around fires, but I just cannot bring myself to get there based on the research. At the end of the day, smoke from wood fires does not respect property lines. I understand the frustration, folks feeling that they're not being afforded the right to enjoy their private properties to the fullest, but I can't get to the point where we are superseding the property rights of neighboring residents, particularly those who are vulnerable to breathing and lung issues. Thank you.
Excellent complete commentary there, Councillor Bodley, and thank you very much for, I know, your strong efforts in going door to door earlier this year and having personal conversations with lots of people. Next up, I have Councillor Vasic, and then I'll weigh in.
Thanks through you, Mayor Jaworski, and thanks everyone already for your comments. Like most of the issues that come to us, we even if we have the same reason for bringing them forward, we often have different solutions. So like you, Ryan, and others who are in support of backyard fires, you're coming from it from a standpoint of community care, and just like you are coming from it from a standpoint of community care in support of backyard fires, I am coming in from a position of community care in opposition to backyard fires and in support of the staff motion. I couldn't agree more that we need to connect with people. I can tell you that after 4 months of having a newborn baby at home with a 6-year-old who is back at online schooling with no one around to support us and no one to hand that baby off for an hour, 15 minutes even, for the both of us to spend 15 minutes in quiet. I can't tell you how much I would love to have some people in my backyard to sit around with. But when the time comes when we can hand off our baby, who obviously can't wear a mask, so we're being pretty cautious about that, even when we can see people at a distance, we will be doing so without a fire, and I believe we can do so without a fire in the city. Like my colleagues and like many of the people who have reached out to me, and the science says, I just can't reconcile what I agree is a really fun thing to do. I truthfully agree with the environmental health, mental health of the concern about what it might mean for one's mental health and for the environment. And as we've heard, young people nowadays have major anxiety around the climate emergency and are asking us to do everything we possibly can, bold action to do anything we can to mediate this climate emergency, because like we heard earlier, they don't know if they have a future and they're sitting with this. And this is, yeah. And so, and of course the other piece is cost. And that would be, like a few other councillors have said, a discussion for another time, should this go in a different direction, which it's not, but I'm still speaking to it. So, and I agree that we need big policy actions, and it's not great to pit things on individuals, but we do have also, like we talked earlier, we have some individual responsibility. I'd be interested in looking at other options to reduce our propane use in this city. We personally have used a push mower since we bought this house 12 years ago, and we have a used hybrid car. Anyways, the story around that's kind of funny, but anyways, so we make those personal choices too, and so I need my personal choices and my political decisions to align. And so by supporting the staff motion, I will be aligning those, as well as supporting the voice of many constituents who are not in support of this. I am very enthusiastic about community fires. I love the thought of using public funds for public spaces where people can come together in a backyard. I love that it will require not enforcement, and our enforcement staff's wonderful. But I love that it will require not necessarily enforcement staff, but likely parks and environment staff. And so we're also moving away from a punitive model and towards towards neighborliness. And I think I've been very public about what I believe about an enforcement versus a restorative approach and a relational approach. And so for all those reasons, I would like to thank everyone who has reached out. And I do hate to, you know, make a decision that's against what some people would like. It's hard, but like Councillor Bodley said, it's even though the survey says 80% responded, it from our experience, it is definitely more 50-50. And so I'd like to thank everyone who's spent the time to do this so far. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vasek. And since we're on first time around, I'd like to give my thoughts, and I won't repeat what's been said. I did go with talk to bylaw, you know, because we've approved backyard chickens, and now we're talking about backyard fires. And we're doing a comparison on the work effort. As you saw in our report, it's about 300 complaints in our neighboring city on backyard fires. And so I'd ask the question, what are the complaints against existing licensed hen owners in that community as well? And the answer is like 1 or 2 per year. So the difference in call volume of backyard chickens and backyard hens for people who want to do them is like 150 to 1 difference. So it is a very different situation on those 2 topics. And then I think the concept of the part 3 of our recommendation that staff continue the current community campfire program and look for modifications to enable more opportunities for participation as outlined in part of the report. And I will signal to Commissioner Dykstra that certainly that is very important to me, and I'm going to guess on behalf of all councillors, since it looks like people are sort of keen on some aspect of community fires, a very equitable solution enabling everyone. And so whatever can be done in the coming 2 years to advance that, should this pass, I think would very much be appreciated by council. And with that, I will go back to second time around, Councillor Reeth, please.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski. I just quickly, that status quo for staff in this will mean status quo for the community, those folks that are already enjoying their backyards with a fire pit.
Okay, thank you. With that, I see no further commentary, no further hands up, I should say. And with that, I will call the vote, beginning with Ward 4. Councillor Freeman, oh, sorry. Yeah, Councillor Freeman, you moved it.
Yep, yeah. I'm ready to go. I vote in favor of the motion. Thank you.
And we'll just go in ward order. And if Councillor Vasek, I don't hear you.
Sorry, my bad. Councillor Vasek in favor.
Thank you.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonago in favor.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor, excuse me, Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Reeth opposed.
And the mayor's in favor too. That carries 7-1. So with that, thank you very much to everyone who put in a lot of effort in this. Certainly hadn't been revisited in quite some time. I don't know what the time frame was, but it's certainly always good to hear this type of good democratic discussion. I would note there's another municipality in Ontario that is currently undergoing debate of restricting their current open air bylaw and they're trying to figure out how to restrict it simply because of all the complaints because of the fires that are going on, and they don't want to ban, but they don't know what to do in between. So there are discussions like that going on in other municipalities. Now with that, we're actually at the next part. I think we'll go through one more item, then take a short break. And this one is item E, zoning bylaw amendment, Z2006, to remove the holding symbol from 364 Woolwich Street, Sunvest Homes Corp. And I have introductory remarks from John Voss, the planner. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mayor. I guess it's good evening, Mayor, Council members, CMT, members of the public. Just a bit of a summary as to what's happening with this application, where we're at, and where our recommendation is. So Sunvest Homes has applied to remove the holding symbol from the property at 364 Woolwich Street in order to proceed with redeveloping the property with up to 3 single detached dwellings. In order to remove the holding symbol, the applicant must satisfy 5 specific conditions, including assurance that the large elm tree on Woolwich Street will not be impacted. A formal public meeting occurred on April 19th, which included a presentation from city staff, the applicant, and the neighboring landowner. Council voted unanimously to defer its decision, seeking further assurance that the elm tree will be protected, and directed staff to consult with the city's manager of parks, operations, forestry, and horticulture. Based on our consultation, staff have provided additional recommendations which should further ensure the elm tree is protected, including enlarging the tree protection zone, maintaining the existing driveway, prohibiting the use of salt or chloride in the winter, and financial securities and an assurance that all measures will be implemented. Staff continue to recommend approval of the holding removal application from the entire property as outlined in the staff reports. However, if council decides that the tree protection measures are insufficient, then an alternative recommendation has been provided in order to retain the holding symbol on a portion of the property while allowing development to proceed on the remainder of the property. I'm available to respond to any questions council might have, and I do note that other delegates have registered as well, including the applicant, their arborist, and the adjacent landowner.
Excellent. Thank you very much, John. I'll just pause for a second to see if any hands go up or if people want to ask you questions afterward. We'll see then. I'm not seeing anything at this time, so I will ask our deputy clerk to let in our first of 2 delegates. Let's see. Rainer Mueller is here, resident of Waterloo. Can you invite Rainier in, please?
Hello. Sound check. Hello.
You're doing well.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mayor Jaworski and members of council. My name is Rainer Mueller. I live at 442 Lexington Crescent with my wife. We are backyard neighbors to the development. But more importantly, we submit our comments again tonight on behalf of ourselves and the neighborhood in general north of Woolwich Street. Tonight marks the culmination of about 4 months of review and exchange on this proposal. On April 19th, we outlined our rejection of the development proposal and also of the disillusionment of a wider and wider group of citizens who do not consider themselves part of a process. Put in short form, this development is too much on too small a piece of property. We are not opposed to development of any kind, but we seek thoughtful development that understands and considers the surrounding environment. The statistics show that these 3 lots will be substantially smaller than any other in the area north of Woolwich Street. The homes will be situated with 3-meter side yard setbacks, leaving only 9.8 wide meter homes. These are much narrower than the new homes constructed on the south side of Woolwich a few years ago. By comparison, on those 47-foot lots, there are 39-foot wide homes. And on these 52-foot wide lots, we will find 32-foot wide homes based on the current side yard setbacks. Is this really where we want to go? And to us as neighbors, this is all quite clear. This is the wrong development for this place in Waterloo. The last few weeks have considered the impact of development on the large elm tree and other mitigation measures to save the tree. Your staff planner, which we just heard from, notes that while mitigation measures can greatly reduce potential impacts to the tree, we recognize that it is not possible to ensure 100% protection. As such, we have provided a second recommendation for council's consideration, which would remove the holding symbol from a majority of the property while maintaining it on the portion of lands closest to the tree. And you find that in your package in Schedule C. If council can't see its way to outright rejecting this application for all the reasons outlined, not just tonight, but in all of our other submissions and in my presentation on the 19th, then it must approve the alternative recommendation to postpone the development of Lot C until after the elm tree dies of natural causes. That brings us to today, and here we are again. We have one individual's proposal overriding the opposition of many. Your staff now recognizes that the proposed development risks the loss of an irreplaceable heritage tree. Making the right decision tonight can offer hope to those who believe no one is listening, and we encourage you to take a stand to protect the integrity of the process and our elm tree. And lastly, we aren't naive to think that this land will remain as one lot. But 3 lots is too much on too little. It does not protect the elm tree, and it is inconsistent with the neighborhood and also what has been established as a precedent in this part of Waterloo. Thank you for your time.
Thanks very much for your presentation. I'll just pause for a moment while I look to see if any hands go up for any questions. Seeing none, thanks very much for your presentation tonight. And I will ask our Deputy Clerk to bring in the next delegate, which is Dave Galbraith of IBI Group and Tim McCormick, perhaps others.
Good evening, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, great, thank you. So my name is Dave Galbraith and I'm a planner at IBI Group here on behalf of the applicant. As discussed in my previous delegations to council, the applicant has applied to remove the holding provision applicable to the site. In our opinion, the application has satisfied the technical tests set out in the holding provision with regards to verification that it will not negatively impact surrounding private services, that it can be built above the groundwater table, and that it will not negatively impact the adjacent Walter Bean Trail or its use. In addition to these technical tests, as discussed in the proposed block plan, it's our opinion that proposed development will be compatible with the planned residential character of the north side of Woolwich. While the lots are smaller than those to the north, the nature and size of the lots is fully compatible with these adjacent residential uses. The internal lots will be over 50 feet wide, and the corner lot will be over 65 feet wide. So these lots will still allow for large single detached dwellings. At the last council meeting with regards to the application, the file was referred back to staff for further review by the city's forester, particularly with regards to the impact of the development on the elm tree. I'm joined tonight by my colleague, Tim McCormick, who will speak to these protection matters recommended by the city forester.
Thank you. So as Dave alluded to, I'm the arborist. I had the privilege of actually looking at this big tree. It is in good shape. And one of those things I wanted to point out is that it is, all efforts are being made to protect the tree. And that has been the intent from the start of this process. Looking at the tree, big important elements to consider when working around protection is really the roots. In this case, because it is overlapping the development by approximately 2.5 meters, where the drip line goes. And currently that is a driveway. And one of the things, and through the process of our reviewing this is looking at previous history around the tree, elements that have happened to the tree and everything else that's gone on with it. It's important to note that Woolwich Street was reconstructed and rebuilt, and the city invested a lot of time, money, and effort in protecting that tree. Along that same vein, that same driveway that's now in question was rebuilt. So at that point, root damage would have occurred and would have impacted this tree at that point. So at this point here, now looking at it, our recommendation is to try to minimize any impact, which is by either preserving the driveway as noted, or in case of moving the driveway out completely, in which case there would be a need to remove some of the material from the top of it, which would already have been disturbed, and an opportunity to put topsoil back in, which is a benefit to the tree long term in giving it the availability of additional root space and opportunity to do that. Roots can be managed in very sensitive manners. That includes proper pruning, proper observation, which was elements that were all put forward by the city forester and elements that we're in support of, and having observation completed on site. We have no objection to that, whether it's our staff, a separate outside company, or city staff, or all. We want to make sure that we have those opportunities to be able, that the tree is going to be protected. We want to make sure that that happens. The tree protection fencing can be maintained, it'll be erected, and in my professional opinion, there'll be minimal risk to this tree based on the previous work that's been done and the proposed work going forward. As far as the securities and the posting of securities, there's no objections to that either. It's a good way of maintaining and understanding that there's an opportunity to protect the tree and an incentive to do so. And there's no objection at this point either from the developer to take that on and understand. The biggest thing in our part is understanding when it can be lifted and understanding the process of what the securities cover, and making sure that everyone's aware of what's covered and what's not covered. We want to make sure that everyone's protected as well as the tree. So that's the end goal of that. As far as the overall quality of the tree, we don't see any risk at this point from what's being proposed, and it can be done in a manner that will respect the quality of the tree, the age of the tree, and can be delivered in a way that'll promote the long-term success and health of the tree. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you very much as well, Dave, for that. I'll just pause to see if there's any questions on for arborist. Councillor Vasic, please go ahead.
Thanks to you, Mayor Jaworski. Thanks for all of that detail. Can you tell me a little bit more about the financial securities? So you mentioned you agree to when they can be lifted. So I am curious how long the financial security agreement is in effect for. And then I'll have a follow-up question too.
I'm not sure there's an actual set timeline at this point. I know the City of Toronto uses this mechanism very frequently, and typically it's once the development is completed that they have been, it's been lifted. The protection is afforded for keeping equipment, construction out of the area, and if everything is maintained and implemented properly, the security can be returned. That to me is the fair part with those elements. And again, the biggest thing is our worry with any of these big trees and anything else is the risk of something happening. Say the development takes 2 years and someone hits, God forbid, someone hits the tree with a car, gets hit by lightning, it gets emerald ash, or it gets Dutch elm disease. Those are things that are outside or natural elements or outside control of the actual applicant. And that's one of the things we want to make sure, and that's one of the things City of Toronto's done a good job of is highlighting that acts of nature are not part of that. It is really solely on impacts as a result of construction.
Thanks. And how do you know that it's a result of construction if it were to die later? So what I mean when I ask that is do you know how long construction can have a potential impact on a tree for? Are there residual effects of construction on tree roots is my question, I guess.
Yeah, there can be. And the bottom line is Woolwich Street still could be ongoing construction impact as well. So there's a risk there as well. It can take a year. Normally you see it pretty quickly in mature trees. They don't respond well to change. That's one of the things. Big mature trees don't like things, especially their roots being messed with, whether that's change in water, change in available nutrients, compaction's a big one. Those are elements that come up very quickly, and you normally start to see a pretty clear indication in either the leaf, the growth, and other stuff in the upper crown of the tree that would indicate that there's something wrong. The benefit, some of those things can be rectified. Compaction, things like that can be dealt with in some form. If it starts to change water flow and other things like that, it can have a longer term impact. Again, with what's being proposed here, there's none of that change that will impact that directly. So again, we're not anticipating any of those major changes, but it could be there. And again, there could be other impacts that happen as a result of the boardwalk going in around it, the road being constructed along it, the curbs being cut in. Those are all elements we're not aware of at this point. So what we try to do is document the current health of the tree, understand where it's at, and then monitor it through the construction process to make sure we're seeing what's happening throughout, that we can catch it early. We don't want to see something happen.
Yeah, no, that's great. You sound very confident about that, which is good. Oh gosh, sorry. Then my third question is, yeah, so it just sounds like, given it's a mature tree, is what you're saying that it likely would have been negatively impacted by the willage construction, and that it wasn't, gives you some confidence that the mitigation measures you intend to put in place now will also likely minimize impact to, like, it probably would have died with the willage construction, is sort of what it seems like you're saying, or am I misinterpreting that?
Yes and no. The driveway itself, where the concern is, was impacted as part of that construction. So the reality is, when those roots were cut for putting the driveway base in, for putting the new asphalt in, for putting the servicing in, for cleaning up that area as part of the roadway construction and the trail work there, the damage would have been done. The tree is rebounded. Again, when we were out looking at it, there was no indication from my, looking at it going, wow, there's something wrong with this. The tree seems to be healthy. It seems to be putting on new growth. It's doing all the things we want to see a tree do after construction. So it's one of those elements that this tree has rebounded well from that. And the fact is that it's only happened, a year and a half, 2 years ago, also means that we're likely not going to find new roots in those areas. It's gravel. It's not the ideal condition for root growth. There's a lot of reasons why what we're proposing in the driveway area itself, it basically creates a situation where we shouldn't be impacting the tree again, which is also a bonus because it's already happened once. We shouldn't be having that impact again. Doesn't mean we won't, doesn't mean we won't act carefully through the process, but it just leads me to believe, because of the previous impact, that we will likely have a minimal impact as a result of that.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. And I see no further questions from the delegation, so I will let you guys go. Thank you very much for coming out today and as representing the owner.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No problem. That is it. And so what I'll do is turn it back to see if council has any questions or would like to move a motion. And I have a question. Please go ahead, Councillor Vasek.
Thanks, through you, Mayor Jaworski. There was just one question. This was for John. One question from the last meeting that I'm hoping that you can maybe elaborate on, from Councillor Bonagor. It was a good question about, why would a developer be the one organizing or proposing the block plan, and was the city involved in that, and to what extent, and why would it be involved, and why wouldn't it be? So if you could just elaborate on that from last time, I think that would be helpful.
Sure. Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Vasek. The city has outlined what we determined to be an appropriate lot size and framework for how development should happen in this area based on the OP and the zoning bylaw. Those are what our guiding documents are. If the applicant's proposing something different to that, which they are, some reduced lot sizes, they are the ones that need to provide the justification. So they've prepared the block plan and the accompanying report explaining why they're proposing what they're proposing and how it matches and can fit in with what is the existing conditions. Staff have reviewed that and determined that we agree with their conclusions. We agree that the lots they're proposing do work and they don't impact the surrounding context. And so we're comfortable with the report they've done. And that's the standard process for any development application, where it's up to the applicant to prepare the justification and staff and agencies review that documentation.
Thank you, John. I don't know if anyone else wants to follow up on that. Mayor Jaworski.
At this point in time, I don't see further questions at this time.
Yes. So Mayor Jaworski, I'm happy to move with a comment.
Okay, I'll look for Councillor Vasic to put on the floor. I'll look to see if the ward neighbor would be happy to second it.
Yes, I will second it.
Excellent. Thank
Councillor
you very much.
Freeman.
Yeah, thank you. And so go ahead, Councillor Vasic.
Thanks. So, Rainer, I'd like to thank you and everyone for all the work you've done to dig deep, really deep into both this application and what it highlighted about the process. And I also like that you've proposed an alternative, but I see the merits in it, and I see that it is potentially a compromise. But I have to be honest that the only reason I would go for that is because I would be worried that you wouldn't vote for me next time if I decided to run, and I just can't make decisions like that. Because I believe that the holding symbol has been satisfied, including from before and now with the elm tree as well. So I'm in support of the staff recommendation. And just for everyone's awareness, I would like to bring, once we vote on this, a separate recommendation related to the tree and requesting staff look into, explore if we should be looking into a cultural landscape heritage designation for this as well. So I am sorry that it's not, I'm not voting in the way that you would both like me to. I do hope that we can engage on the OP process together and in improving processes, but I also appreciate that you may have absolutely no interest in that as well, which would be fine. And so, yeah, so thank you. I'm sorry it's not going that way, and I do believe that the holding symbol has been satisfied, so I will be voting in favor of the staff recommendation.
Yeah, I don't see any further hands up at this point. So let's start the.
Sorry, Mayor, I'd like to make some comments if I could.
Oh, sorry. Oh, absolutely. Please go ahead, Councillor Freeman.
Yeah, so a few of the things that really resonated with me about this process that I think is of value as we're headed into doing a comprehensive municipal review of our official plan is that we had a situation where we had an applicant who knew the planning process, knew to bring to the OP table the request to divide these lots into 3. And while we did do a fulsome consultation more broadly with the whole community, this was a particular parcel of land that reasonably affected a small number of people. And when I reflect back on that, it makes me think that I know that we're looking at our consultation processes. I feel as though when we have a single small lot like this that's in the midst of a highly like a stable residential neighborhood and or a residential community that's being built, that we need to almost do a separate notice to the residents in and around that particular parcel, because they wouldn't know that the official plan process and the public notices associated with that would necessarily have an effect directly on their property boundary. I recognize that maybe the intent of the Planning Act is to show that, but it's not going to happen if you don't have a planner as a personal representation of your property. I just don't think people are going to know, or if you don't have an individual who's going about and knocking on doors and saying, hey, I think you should look at the city's OP process because we have an exception coming in Schedule C under 154 or whatever, that is the adjacent property. I don't think that people would know that. And so I learned a huge piece through this process that I really think that we can think differently as a city about. And I think it's a justifiable comment. I don't know. We get so enthralled in this work as councillors that, and we know the public process isn't robust enough, but we don't often see really, really good examples of where the public process was essentially, to the viewpoint of the individuals nearby, non-existent. And So I'd like to see us start thinking a little bit differently about that, as I said, through the MCR that's going to be coming up for the official plan. And then more broadly, in terms of the staff recommendation, I really appreciate the fact that this went back for a much stronger look at that tree. I really wish too, though, that when we did the OP work, that I'd known that the tree was on this property, because we'd spent so much time dealing with the tree through the road construction work. So again, a ton of learning lessons. It's hard. It's a tough decision today, because I know that not just Rainer and his wife Dean, but there's a lot of other people who feel as though they were left behind by this process, and so that makes this decision very difficult.
Thank you. I will begin the voting with the ward councillor. Please go ahead, and then we'll go in ward order.
Yeah, Councillor Vasek in favor.
I think we'll just keep going then. Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonigo opposed.
And Councillor Hanmer is off. I forgot to mention that this was the one she declared a pecuniary interest on. So
Sorry,
please go
my
ahead.
apologies.
Yeah, no problem. I forgot about that.
Yep, sorry, me too. Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Reeth in favor.
And Councillor Freeman in favor.
The mayor's in favor too. That carries 6-1, 5-1. Well, one absent, one against. So thank you very much for that, and John and team for taking a good extra look at this one in favor of the tree in particular. Now with that, I'll just look to the clerk with respect to the next item, which is related to this. With I think Natalia has a. I can pull it up. I have not heard back. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Yeah. So we'll just pull this up, Councillor Vasek, and please go ahead. This is a recommendation that's in the area, but not directly related to this planning matter.
All right. Well, I brought up a really good thought when Councillor Freeman. Oh, sorry, I have to turn my. I can't hear you guys that well. An important thought about trees and how we honor our natural landscape. So, and also one of the things that a lot of people have brought to my attention this council term is residents who want a bylaw to protect trees on private and public property. And so it's one of the things that I've been exploring with staff. And some of the suggestions are, maybe rather than enforcement, some places go through a cultural heritage landscape. And so I like the idea of starting to think about it through perhaps a cultural landscape lens, or as we move to have our equity team thinking about what our work means in terms of land and Indigenous land knowledge, and that's for later conversations when that equity team comes. But I think this sets a good starting point for honoring the landscape. And so I'm hoping that we could explore if this elm tree could be a potentially designated cultural have cultural heritage value or interest. So I'd like to direct staff to explore that, and I'd be really happy for council support on that.
Yeah, just for accessibility purposes, could you just read the amendment for people who are listening in?
Yeah, for sure. That staff be directed to review and report back to council with recommendations regarding the potential designation of the elm tree located on Woolwich Street, adjacent to the property at 358 Woolwich Street, as a tree of cultural heritage value or interest, including evaluation of whether the criteria for designation are met and the process for designation.
Thank you. And just for benefit of councillors, again, that this is sort of a corollary to the last item, but not a planning matter and more of a future-looking item, which is why we're not doing notice motion, waiving notice motion, or anything like that. It's just sort of is better as a standalone future direction. I do have Councillor Reeth ready to say okay.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski. I would happily second that motion. Thank you, Councillor Vasic, for bringing it forward.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions of the direction on the table? I don't see any, so let's start the voting with the ward councillor, please.
Councillor Vasic in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favour.
Councillor Bodley in favor, although I was confused whether Sandra was back or not.
Councillor Reeth in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too. That carries with the ones of us that are here. So that's
Thanks,
good.
everyone.
Yeah, and that's good and clean. Thank you very much, John, for this. Well, I guess on the last item. And with that, we're going to take a 5-minute break. And so I will see you back here at in 5 minutes. See you then. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the City of Waterloo Council meeting. And we do have a couple of items left, one of significance, a formal public meeting. But since we are just back, just to confirm via your voice, we'll do a roll call as well. We'll do a roll call again, beginning with Ward 1, please.
Councillor Hanmer, present.
Councillor Bodley, present.
Councillor Reeth, present.
Councillor Freeman, present.
Councillor Bassick, present.
Councillor Henry, present.
Councillor Bonigo, present.
And the mayor's here as well. That means we are all here. And we'll move on to item 12A, a formal public meeting. And for anyone who would like to speak at this public planning meeting, please call the clerk's office at 519-747-8705. That's 519-747-8705 to be added to the list of delegations for tonight's meeting, beginning right now. This is a formal public meeting to consider official plan amendment number 31, zone change application Z2002, draft plan of subdivision 30T2401 for West Haven Limited, 28 West Hill Drive. Any persons who want further notice of this application, including the passage of any bylaw, should contact the planner, John Voss, at 519-747-8527 or john.voss at waterloo.ca. That's john.vos@waterloo.ca. Will the clerk please advise council of the method used to give notice of the meeting and the date notice was given?
Notice was advertised in the Waterloo Chronicle and Waterloo Region Record on May 6, 2021, and mailed or emailed to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property and to all persons who requested further notice.
Thank you. I will now invite the planner, John Voss, to give a brief overview of the application.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening again to the mayor, council members, CMT, the public. Next slide, please. This is a formal meeting for proposed development at 28 West Hill Drive. Properties located within the Westvale neighborhood, fronting onto West Hill Drive and West Haven Street. The property has an area of approximately 2 hectares or 5 acres and currently has a single detached dwelling and a barn. Next slide, please. This is a copy of the draft plan of subdivision for the lands. The proposal will connect the north and south sections of West Haven Street with 19 single detached dwellings on either side of the street. A multi-unit residential block is proposed fronting onto West Hill Drive. A new walkway is proposed along the southerly border and will connect West Hill to the stormwater pond and the existing trail network. The storm pond is proposed to be expanded to accommodate stormwater from the proposed development. Next slide, please. Official Plan Amendment 31 will redesignate a portion of the lands as open space and create a specific provision area for the multi-unit block in order to increase the height of the apartment building from 12 to 13 meters. I should note that the specific provision area number 73 might change to 74 or 75 depending on the next available number. Next slide, please. The following zone changes are proposed in order to implement the draft plan. Single detached lots will be zoned residential 4. The walkway block linking West Hill Drive to West Haven Street will be zoned Parks and Recreation. The multi-unit block will be zoned residential 9 with site-specific provisions to allow the increased building height. And finally, the walkway east of West Haven Street and the stormwater pond will be zoned conservation. Next slide, please. Staff recommend that council adopt official plan amendment number 31, approve the zone change application, and adopt draft plan of subdivision as outlined in the staff report. Thank you, and I can respond to any questions.
Thank you, John. As a reminder, if any person watching tonight would like to receive further notice of application, you can contact John at john.voss@waterloo.ca. That's john.voss@waterloo.ca. I don't think, yes, we do have a delegation here tonight. Council, I'll just look to see if you want questions for John, or do you want to wait to hear the delegate as well? But in anticipation, I will go with Councillor Bonagor.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski. Actually, I'm happy to hold my questions until after the delegate. Thank you.
Excellent. I see Councillor Hanmer will as well. So with that, we'll invite the delegation, which is Megan Garrity, Senior Planner, GSP Group. We're just looking, Megan, at your audio does not show connected. Maybe you can do a test. One moment while we try and get this connected. Yeah, while we work on that technical issue for the connection, I'm going to go back to questions. I'll go to Councillor Bonagor, just knowing that you're asking of John, and you might have to ask it again for the delegate. Please go ahead.
Certainly. Thank you, Mayor Jaworski. And Mr. Voss, please feel free to just set any of these questions aside for the delegate. So one of my questions was regarding whether there were, with the apartment sizes that are proposed, the report says there's a range of housing types in the dwellings and a range of unit sizes looking at 1 and 2 bedrooms. But I'm hoping to get an idea of the size of that per se. So the 2-bedroom units, are they the size that would essentially permit a family, or are we looking at more, perhaps a couple?
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Bonagor, the current concept that's being proposed is primarily 1 and 2 bedroom units, which may or may include dens. Those units are primarily for 1 or 2 bedroom, or families per se. They could have a child in the second room. They're not proposing any 3-bedroom units, but I would note that these are just a concept plan and that could change moving forward. But the current concept does not propose that.
Okay, because that's one thing that I'm sort of flat noticing with all developments coming through the city. So I'm not picking on this one in particular, but I am curious to know what provisions are being made for families who may wish to either choose a smaller home or may just be priced out of other homes. So I will put that to the delegate as well once they're online. Again, this could be for you or for the delegate, but I'm curious about, given that these are being proposed potentially for families, what kind of green space or recreation amenity is being proposed within that R9 zone?
Yeah, through you, Mayor, and to Councillor Bonagor, the zoning does require a certain amount of amenity space per bedroom. I don't have the exact numbers to how much that would be, but the applicant is proposing an outdoor amenity area within the rear area of the property, which could include a play structure, gazebo, other shelter. The concept, the site plan is being reviewed currently, and those details will be reviewed, but the applicant does have other renderings and details as to what that proposed development will be, so they can provide some further details.
Okay, that is great. I will put that question to them as well. And the other question I had is just given the other developments for this area and some of the congestion issues that we're already seeing on the major roads near there, is there concern about cut-through traffic where people are trying to use the Tim Hortons driveway to avoid the roundabout? And are there any ideas for how or if that could be discouraged?
Through Mayor to Councillor Bonagor, that is a detail, specifically the cut-through traffic option, and really encouraging vehicles at this property to use the local street network to access the roundabout and all their destinations beyond without having to navigate through the adjacent properties. In terms of the site design, there's locating the driveway at the south end of the property rather than the north end, which would align with the adjacent driveway. Locating it to the south end will likely reduce that significantly. And also the direction of how the driveway enters the street. It could be angled more towards the south in order to, again, direct vehicles as they're leaving the site to look towards the south rather than going towards the north. Those sort of on-site details are being considered. There really isn't other options that could mitigate what's happening on those adjacent properties themselves. But in terms of this specific development, there's a thought that's gone into the design.
Okay, no, that's great. Thank you very much. That's all from me, Mayor.
Thank you, and I'm just going to check on Megan's audio connection now.
Can you hear me? Hello?
We can. That is working out very well. Yeah.
Great. Sorry about that.
No worries. Great to know that this is working. So, are you ready to go now, Megan, with respect to your presentation? We have it up on the screen.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And my apologies. As I was trying to fix the issue here, I didn't quite get the first few questions. So if there are further questions, hopefully I can answer them after I make my presentation here. So good evening, Mayor Jaworski, members of council, staff, and any members of the public who have joined. My name is Megan Garrity. I'm a senior planner with GSP Group. I'm here this evening on behalf of West Haven Limited and their partners on the project, Reeth Heritage Properties. Also on the line, I believe we've got some others from our team, including Melissa McGregor from Reeth Heritage Properties, Matt Nainomiya from Walter Fady, and Julia Salvini of Salvini Consulting. They won't be presenting, but will be available for questions at the end as well. Mr. Voss has already taken us through some of the information, so I'll try not to repeat too much, but hope to provide some additional detail. Next slide, please. So the subject lands are located east of the Iron Needles and Herb Street West roundabout, and the site is approximately 2.19 hectares in size. It's made up of a remnant block from an existing plan of subdivision, as well as a property known as 28 West Hill Drive. The site currently has a single detached dwelling as well as a barn, but the rest of the property is predominantly vacant. Next slide, please. Sorry, next slide. Thank you. As Mr. Voss has already highlighted, the site's designated low-density residential, which permits low-rise residential dwellings, including apartment buildings when specific criteria are met, including a maximum density of 150 bedrooms per hectare and a maximum building height of 12 meters. Next slide, please. So the site is zoned future determination as well as residential 4. Next slide, please. And as Mr. Voss has already explained, the proposed development consists of a portion of Municipal Road, which was always intended to be developed to connect either end of the existing West Haven dead ends. Along that street, we've proposed to continue the development pattern of the existing subdivision with 19 single detached residential dwellings. And there are 3 blocks within the subdivision which contribute to pedestrian connectivity through the subdivision. And those include blocks 21 to 23, and they're just along the south end of the property boundary there. The block located with frontage along West Hill Drive would be for the multiple residential development. Next slide, please. And so that multiple residential block, we've requested an increase of building height from 12 to 13 meters. To ensure there's sufficient floor-to-ceiling height to accommodate mechanical equipment on the first and fourth floor, the request will not allow for any additional stories, just the 1 meter to the overall height of the building. Next slide, please. This is a copy of our latest site plan just for the multiple residential block. The driveway, as you can see, is located on the southernmost end of the site to be as close as possible to Ira Neal's Boulevard. And the building length has been reduced since the informal public meeting by 7 meters and is now approximately 90 meters in length. The 2-story bump out has been added to the West Hill entrance at the front. It's maybe difficult to see on this slide, but I'll show you on the next slide with a canopy detail. Other changes include reconfiguration of the parking and amenity areas at the back of the site, which will be reviewed in more detail through the site plan application process. So just on the next slide. Here's a rendering of the front elevation that shows some of these details that I mentioned a little bit more clearly. Next slide, please. So as Mr. Voss spoke to earlier, the requested zoning includes an R9 zone for multiple residential buildings with the maximum height of 13 meters to match the proposed official plan amendment. The R4 zoning would be applied to the proposed single detached dwellings along West Haven Street connection, which matches the zoning on either side with further single detached lots to match the adjacent subdivision. And the the conservation zoning, the OS3, will be applied to blocks 22 and 23, kind of in the lighter green areas there to match the existing zoning of the open space lands of the adjacent subdivision. And the OS1 zone for parks and recreation would be applied to the walkway similarly or consistently with other walkways in the neighborhood. Next slide, please. So in summary, the proposed draft plan of subdivision will implement the planned road connection between the existing ends of West Haven Street. We'll add 19 single detached lots, a mixed use block, and open space blocks. The zoning will allow for the development of the lots with single detached dwellings and the development of a multiple residential block with an apartment building of up to 13 meters in height. Similarly, this height has been requested through the proposed official plan amendment. Overall, we believe the proposed draft plan configuration and accompanying official plan and zoning bylaw amendment will allow for a development that is well suited to complement the existing neighborhood. I thank you for your attention. As I mentioned at the beginning, myself, Melissa, Matt, and Julia are all available should you have any follow-up questions.
Very much a wonderful team to support you there. I will look to Councillor Bonagor to bring back her questions so that the delegate can hear them.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Jaworski. So thank you for all the details. I have a few questions. I did ask staff, but I was planning to ask you anyway, so you didn't miss anything. I'm just firstly curious about the apartments in the proposed R9 area. I'm just wondering if there's to the size of these apartments, given the huge need for affordable family housing in the city. So can you give us an idea of the 2-bedroom units, like what kind of size we're looking at there, whether it's like a 2+ den, a 2+ office, and if you've given any thought to potentially 3-bedroom apartments in here as well?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I know that Reeth's Heritage was going to be on the line this evening, and I believe in our discussions with them, they were looking at a mixture of 1 beds and 2 beds, but also 2 beds plus den. We haven't confirmed yet the number or the mix in the building. We are limited to the 150 bedrooms per hectare, so that will kind of dictate the upper limit, but I'm not sure if maybe Melissa, if she is on the line, if she wanted to elaborate on that response.
One moment while we just check the attendee list.
Sound check? Can you hear me?
Oh, there we go. Yeah,
awesome.
we can.
Melissa here.
Thanks for directing this to me, Megan. We are definitely working right now through the floor plans to see what is possible, keeping in mind the density requirements on this site. And the larger units typically are at our corners, and we're looking at about 840 square feet. Somewhere around there is our larger units, and we have been able to in the past have success with that size of unit. Getting 2+ ends comfortably.
Okay, and thank you for the detail. That sounds promising, and all I can say is that I definitely hear from the community about a need for that. So I encourage you to keep on looking. So I'm curious, this could be for, I'm not sure which of you would want to answer it, but I'm just curious about, given that hopefully there would be room for families, what amenities or green space you might be looking at within that R9 zone.
So just Melissa, to speak to that through you, oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can also take that one.
Okay,
so
go ahead.
we are working right now with the site plan, looking at having dedicated barbecue areas closer to the building. And then further into the green space in the back, having a playground area, a tot lot, perhaps a shade structure back there as well. And then interior to the building, we also offer amenity spaces and fitness areas in our buildings.
That's great to hear, and you've got bonus points from me for a shade structure. It's my one of my pet favorite things. Okay, that is it for me. Thank you, Mayor. I shall leave it to my other councillors to throw their questions at you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bonagor. Next up, I have Ward Councillor Hammer. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mayor, through you. First of all, a thank you and a appreciation to staff and also the delegation for the presentations this evening. And I'm also noting the comments from or questions raised during the informal have been addressed through this presentation, so I appreciate that as well. Councillor Bonagor asked about the traffic and the cut through traffic, and that certainly is a concern in that area of my ward with the roundabout and also with other developments that are going on. In addition to the vehicle traffic, though, is concern about patient, you can tell where my head's at, pedestrian safety as well. And so I wondered, and probably this is a question to both of you, if you could just, both staff and to the delegation, if you could elaborate on the safety measures that you're considering to put in for pedestrian and other non-motorized transportation in the area.
So if I may, it's Megan here from GSP through you, Mr. Mayor. I do believe along West Haven, there would be a continuation of the sidewalks that are started at either of the ends of the existing kind of stubs of that road. And then the internal connections that are provided in the blocks that were mentioned through the presentation are there to provide some of those more internal pedestrian connections to keep people further off of the road and allow some of those opportunities that are kind of vehicle free, I would say. And similarly, I believe we've also got a proposed sidewalk along the frontage of the West Hill portion of the multiple residential development as well.
Okay, thank you for that. And you prompted into my next question with the two seniors facilities that are at 5 and 7 West Hill. There's great concern from that group about the proximity of the driveways and the potential right now, and I recognize that some of the cut-through traffic into the Tim Hortons is actually on that other property. But just remind us what's happening to alleviate some of the concerns of the driveway-on-driveway interaction on West Hill.
So again, through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe the biggest move for this site plan is that we put the driveway as far as possible to the south, so that that would bring people coming in and going out closer to the Ira Needles intersection. So that would be, you know, the obvious and main route that that people would be taking. And I'm not sure if maybe Julia Salvini might be able to elaborate on that response a little bit further.
Sound check, Mr. Mayor, can you hear me?
Great, Julia, please go ahead.
Thank you. So through you, Mr. Mayor, actually, I was going to say exactly what Megan had to say, but I know that there were some comments in the staff report and wondered, pardon me, if staff wanted to elaborate on discussions that they've had with some of the area residents.
Sure, I can respond through you, Mayor, to Councillor Hanmer. We have met with the residents and the property owner for the adjacent lands, as well as the developer proposing development on the lands to the north, making sure that all of the developments that are happening within this area are cohesive and not impacting each other. And in discussions with the residents and the property owner on the lands west of West Hill Drive, we have explored various options on how cut-through traffic could be mitigated. We're still exploring various options, and there's pros and cons to each option. But our goal right now is to make sure that whatever's happening on the lands at 28 West Hill don't further impact the existing conditions. And then those other conditions, those will be resolved through separate processes.
Terrific. Thank you very much, all of you, for your responses, and I appreciate that the safety of both pedestrians and traffic congestion is being thought of as we look at the lands in this area. And I encourage you to continue anything that we can do to continue to alleviate any of these issues will go a long way. Mayor, that's it for me at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? And that would be for anybody on council? I don't think so. So with that, I'd like to thank the team here delegating together, helping us out on this formal public meeting. And I'm just going to go to the deputy clerk to see if the phone has been ringing tonight for people who wish to join in and add themselves as a delegate.
No further delegates or calls, Mayor.
Not surprising. Very good. As the deputy clerk informs me, there are no further speakers. This formal public meeting is concluded, and the application is now open to council for a motion and debate. And I will look to the ward councillor to take us forward, please.
Thank you. The motion to approve the application, whereas council has considered all written and oral submissions from the public and stakeholders, and whereas council has considered the professional opinions of planning staff, therefore be it resolved that council approve staff report IPPW 2021-034, and 2, that council approve official plan amendment number 31, zone change application Z-20-2, draft plan of subdivision 30T-20401, West Haven Limited, 28 West Hill Drive, in accordance with section 6 of the staff report IPPW 2021-034.
Thank you very much. I'll look for a Ward 2 councillor to consider seconding.
Happy to second the motion put forward by Councillor Hanmer. Are we voting at this point? Sorry, I missed that.
No, we are. I'll just look around for a moment.
I'm enthusiastically seconding it.
Well, you're probably not that long from voting for it either. I see no further hands up, and so I'll look for voting to begin with Ward 1.
Thank you. I'm happy to vote in favor of the motion.
Councillor Bodley votes in favor as well.
Councillor Reeth in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Vasic in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favour.
The mayor's in favor too. That carries unanimously. Thank you, John and team, for bringing this to council, and thank you to the applicant as well for obviously something that did need a lot of debate. I move forward in the agenda, and there's no consideration of notice of motion at a previous meeting, no notice of motion. I'll ask council to listen in carefully on communications and correspondence that was in the revised agenda, and it was a letter forwarded to us by City of Kitchener. And as a member of Regional Council, we approved a motion to get better support from upper levels of government to better address homelessness and supports. And the request at the time was that lower tiers consider moving a similar motion so we can hear all the voices of all 7 lower tier municipalities, because we're all in this together and we wish to move forward on this. So I will just read out, we just have to reiterate that we're going to move forward with the motion similar to what we have here in the correspondence from the City of Kitchener. And I'll be looking for somebody to move and second it after I've done reading it. So it goes that the City of Waterloo support the Regional Municipality of Waterloo and other area municipalities in their collective call for funding to respond to the urgent and growing need for housing support funding to end homelessness in Waterloo Region. And that Waterloo City Council requests the provincial government to dedicate specific and sustained health funding for housing supports to help people experiencing homelessness achieve housing stability and recovering from homelessness, and then finally to circulate it to appropriate people. That was listed on the notes, but it's your regular suspects. And so with that, I would look to council. I see Councillor Reeth has put her hand up, and Councillor Hanmer would second it. So please go ahead, Councillor Reeth and Councillor Hanmer. First off, does anybody have any questions about it? Because I think we'll move quickly.
Councillor Reeth here, happy. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Reeth.
Happy to move the motion and vote in favor.
Thank you, and I'll go over to Councillor Hanmer.
Councillor Hanmer, happy to second the motion. It's very timely, and I too will vote in favor.
Thank you.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Bassick in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favour.
Sorry, I'm on mute there. Not sure where I left off. I think it was because I didn't vote. So you probably didn't hear my vote. That carried unanimously. So that's all good. We're finished the communications item. Moving on to unfinished business. Non-questions. Does anyone have any questions?
Mayor, I just had a quick under unfinished business. I just wanted to confirm that with the removal of the holding provision that we didn't overlook the Bill 73 wording, because when the formal public meeting came to council, we deferred the motion. And so I just didn't know whether we needed to make reference to the Bill 73 wording 12A as it related to lifting the holding provision on Woolwich Street.
And let me just check with Mr. Voss if he's still on the line. Or Mr. Rapp.
I am on the line, but I'll defer to Mr. Rapp available.
Yeah.
It's just it's on today's agenda, and I don't want to miss this.
Could you repeat that again, just for clarity, Councillor Freeman?
Yeah,
I did hear it,
sure.
but
so with regard to the lifting of the holding provision on Woolwich Street, the formal public meeting was held at our last meeting, and we deferred the motion. we moved the motion today, and I'm asking if we need to make reference to the Bill 73 wording 12A, because we did not reference that when we deferred it, and we did not reference it this evening when we moved it.
I would recommend that we go over that again just to confirm and get council to support that. I do recommend that.
Okay, so that falls into the unfinished business piece. May I ask the clerks how we go about doing that?
Good question. If I may, it's Cam again. If this works with Madam Clerk, that if it is a simple confirmation of council of the proceeding earlier in the evening, and with that wording attached, because I know it was true based on all the evidence, everything given, but I think that might be the best approach.
Okay, Councillor
Through the
Bassett,
chair to Mr. Rapp,
yeah.
can I confirm with you that the Bill 73 is needed for removal of a holding symbol, because it did not require a formal public meeting under the Planning Act. That was done more for consultation, and so that might answer this question first.
I think our practice, though, Madam Clerk, has been to try and mimic our zoning bylaw amendment process and our official plan amendment process, even with the removal of a holding provision, because I know we do certain things that are in addition to what the Act requires, but we try to mimic the process with the zoning bylaw amendment and the official plan amendment process.
Through the chair, so sorry, we have to adjust our mics for us to speak. First of all, I want to note that Councillor Hanmer had declared a conflict on this item, and so she did leave the meeting 2 minutes ago at 9:32 and hasn't been present for this conversation. I think that this is a highly unusual situation in which the vote has already been held. And so in order to essentially amend the vote, it's a reconsideration. And I think that the vote was unanimous. So I think that if Councillor Freeman wanted to move a motion to reconsider, we could do that at this time. I'm curious if, no, Susan Smith is no longer on the meeting. The Bill 73 wording, oh, sorry, yes, Councillor Vasic has noted it wasn't unanimous. The Bill 73 wording is typically done for greater clarity so that there is an understanding for the reasons of which the decision was made, because we don't note that in our minutes. And so what essentially is being asked for right now is a change to the motion that council voted on. And so if we're going to do that properly, then that is a reconsideration.
I'd rather get this right.
So I would recommend that if someone wanted to move, first, we should deal with the reconsideration, and then the new motion can be moved. And if someone would like us to, we can circulate some Bill 73 wording quickly, although you likely have it in front of you for the 28 West Hill Drive decision. And you would just need to substitute the second, well, the first and the second to match the staff report. So it's really the additional language.
It's Councillor Freeman.
And then we would revote, but let's first vote on reconsideration, if someone would like to move that.
It's Councillor Freeman. I'll move for reconsideration.
Yeah, Councillor Vasic, I'll second it.
I have the wording, Councillor Vassic. I'll quickly email it to you.
I think I used the one for
Yeah,
okay.
so let's vote for reconsideration. Put a notice of.
First, let's vote that we're going to reconsider it.
Yeah, well, let's put a motion on the table that we're going to vote to reconsider it. So
Okay,
go
so
ahead, Councillor Vassic, Councillor Freeman, and then we'll vote.
So we moved and seconded. I vote in favor.
Sure. Councillor Freeman?
Oh, I vote in favor. Sorry, I thought we were just going around the horn.
Oh, yeah. So you second that motion, vote in favor for reconsideration then, Councillor Henry?
So Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Reeth in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too, so that carries. So we have a reconsideration. Now, can I just have somebody read that out, Julie? The whereas council's considered. Hold on, one moment, please. And I'll.
Sorry for that delay. Okay. So this is a motion for reconsideration relating to agenda item 11E, which is zoning bylaw amendment Z20-06 to remove the holding symbol from 364 Willett Street, Sunvest Homes Corporation. And the motion that council is being asked to consider is, whereas council has considered all written and oral submissions from the public and stakeholders, and whereas council has considered the professional opinions of planning staff, therefore be it resolved that council approves staff report IPPW 21-18.1, that council approve zoning bylaw amendment Z20-06 to remove holding symbol from the lands municipally known as 364 Willett Street in accordance with section 6 of IPPW 2021-18 and section A of IPPW 21-18.1, and 3, that council adopt the block plan attached as appendix C to IPPW 2021-18 to guide the future division of land on the north side of Willett Street between Maverick Street and Cedar Cliff Drive.
Excellent. Putting the words in the mouth of the ward councillor. So we'll look for ward councillor and Councillor Freeman to move that and vote in favor.
Councillor Vassic. Yeah, Councillor Vassic in favor.
Councillor Freeman seconds the motion and votes in favor.
Sorry, yes, I forgot to move it.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor opposed.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Reeth in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too. I think this is all just an elaborate trick to see if Tennille would vote the same way second time around. But it worked. Excellent. With that, good catch. Always better to dot all the I's and cross all the T's. And we need to invite Councillor Hanmer back. Just one moment, please. And we have the good fortune to have all of council here again. I will now just look to, that was unfinished business. Moving on to questions. Does any councillor have questions of staff? And seeing none, I will go under new business, please. And I had some hands up already. Councillor Vassic, Councillor Vassic, please go ahead. I'll just catch up on this.
Thanks. I just wanted to say a couple of things. One was that I'm super impressed following along on the neighborhoods newsletter. They have so much good information. I think they'll have their 40th newsletter out soon. And, they do such a good job, I think, of featuring all the wards. And they've highlighted a few things that have been going on in the ward lately. So it's both a shout out to staff and also for doing this newsletter and keeping people informed in such a great way, which they've now translated over to Instagram. And so they highlighted a few really great things that were going on in the ward that people have been doing to try and help people stay connected during this time. One was Lincoln Village Art Contest. So they had a virtual art contest in different categories. Some groups did a herb garden. So they provided the herbs for people at home, and they did like a little workshop to plant the herbs. And back in winter, a new group, the Cardinal Crescent Neighbors, had these cool kits to make like frozen displays or frozen like little crafts that you could put seeds in, and they gave you the whole kit. So just a big shout out to staff who are doing such a great job in trying to keep people and actually keeping people connected and engaged and doing beautiful things for the neighborhoods and getting all the block connectors and convening them. And I've heard from some block connectors about some of the work that they're doing and trying to get off the ground. And they've just really activated the community in such a difficult time to do so. So that was one. And then the second is I just wanted to let everybody know that Kafka's going to be starting shortly. So there are exhibits throughout the city, outdoors. It's our Contemporary Art Festival. Contemporary Art Festival of Kitchener and area. So I encourage everybody to go. I know they're just starting to get set up and really excited about bringing art into public spaces. Again, that's it.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Vasic. Next up, I have Councillor Bonigar.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Jaworski, we're on a little bit of a theme here because mine is also a shout out to art and community across the city. These are really hard times. A lot of us are still feeling pretty rough, and the ability to connect in any way is really appreciated. So I'm going to give a little bit of a shout out to a little pet project. The Grand Porch Party had to cancel last year, and this year they found themselves facing another kind of do we, don't we scenario. So they've pivoted, like so many have had to create GPP at home, and which is a local musician playlist that you can download and play at the same time. So you can kind of be in your backyard or on your front porch or wherever you want to be and still be able to share local music in your environment. So it's just one example of what the kind of pivots and the kind of changes that so many groups are having to consider still. And I want to kind of highlight not just the Porch Party, but everyone who's scrambling and trying so hard to find new ways to reach each other because it's still so important. So thank you. That is all from me.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I will turn it over to Councillor Bodley.
Thank you. Through Mayor Jaworski, just wanted to highlight one good thing and one not so great thing. Tomorrow is the continuation of the Vista Hills Community Garden team building a wonderful community garden in Sundew Park. And for anybody who is listening still or would like to come out and help shovel something like 24 cubic yards of soil, I will be out there shoveling starting in the early afternoon, and I would love any additional help and or shovels and or wheelbarrows you may have to help put that together, but it looks great so far. And really appreciative of all of the work that the neighborhoods team does to get that going as well too. And for my second piece of new business, I would like to formally open up any other NHL hockey teams who are looking for new fans, because I don't know if I can handle, after 40 years of cheering for the Leafs, another year of this level of disappointment yet again. So
I'm in tears too, my friend. I'm wearing
this
the jersey and it's not working.
this council meeting lasted so long that the Leafs were still part of the playoffs when it started. Anyways, taking some time to lament my sadness. Thank you.
Wow, that's a shocker. I have not been following on along other than Saturday night or whenever that was. Wow. I don't see any more other hands up, but I just talked when Councillor Hanmer and I were chatting late last week. We were talking a lot about fireworks. I just wanted to know if you wanted to bring anything up at this time or not at this time, Councillor Hanmer.
Oh, I thank you, Mayor, and for reminding me. I've been on and off this meeting so much, I've kind of lost track of where things are at. I do just want to make a comment to my fellow councillors that I think we all received some concerns about fireworks this past weekend, and so I will be meeting with Bylaw and Fire with Nicole and Chief Heptich to look at some options and things that we may be able to bring back to council for consideration. July 1st is not far away. Not sure that we're going to be able to do things that would change it, but certainly it's not forgotten that we need to take a look at the impact it's having in our community as well. So more to come. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I know Commissioner Dykstra and I had traded notes on this. Is there anything more to add of what's happening elsewhere in communities? I assume it wasn't just City of Waterloo councillors who got emails.
To you, Mayor, this is Commissioner Dykstra. Just following up on this, yes, we're aware of this matter, and I know other communities received concerns about fireworks the past holiday weekend, and that included Waterloo Regional Police. And I know Mr. Anderson's connecting with the local CAOs on the matter, and that can support further discussion that Councillor Hamner is having with our staff. Short term, I can note that from a communication perspective, we can emphasize the bylaw requirements, noting the community concerns, and focus on neighborliness as well in upcoming communications regarding July 1st. So I offer that, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Well, all the best in figuring out something with regards to this in that short period of time. With that, we move on beyond new business to that favorite time of the night of enactment of bylaws. Anyone who wishes to enact some bylaws? Oh, do we have to take it separate? The one the bylaws has Councillor Henmer's. Yeah, let's take it separate. Okay, so and we're enacting some bylaws A, B, and D, and I will look to Councillor Bodley.
Oh, please, thank you. It may be the only thing that makes me feel better after this evening.
Hold on, I just see here. I should pull out item A as well. So we're just moving because that's the new committee people, which two councillors declared a conflict. Councillor Vassick, Councillor Reeth. So we're just enacting bylaws B and D. Start with A. A. Okay. So we're moving item A.
I really hope this lets me move 3 different sets of bylaws. That'll really make my night.
It might extend our night. And you want to do just A? Let's do A because D has to be done. Oh, D has to be last. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Bodley. You're just moving A.
Councillor Bodley would like to move the motion of enacting bylaws 19A, and I will vote in favor.
And we skip forward to Councillor Freeman.
I'll second the motion and also vote in favor, like Councillor Bodley. My leaves are gone. This is the only thing that's going to make me really happy tonight.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bumigor in favor.
I don't even want to admit that I'm a diehard Habs fan, but sorry, guys. Councillor Hanmer in favor of the motion.
And the mayor's in favor too. That carries unanimously. For those of us who are here, we now invite everyone back. Should I do? Okay, so this is where Councillor Hanmer takes some time to cheer for her favorite Canadians, And the rest of us, Councillor Bodley, can take us forward on item C.
Well, I would like to put a motion forward to censure Councillor Hanmer for her abhorrent views, but nevertheless, Councillor Bodley, I would like to enact bylaws 19. Sorry, what am I doing? 19C, and I will vote in favor.
And this is, oh, sorry, Councillor Reeth's back, sorry.
Can I come back?
Yeah,
Councillor Reeth, second the motion and vote in favor.
I vote to second the sanctioning motion as well as the bylaw. I vote in favor for the bylaw.
Thank you.
Councillor Vassic in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too. That carries unanimously with those of us who are here. And now, Councillor Bodley, would you like to do bylaws B and D?
Thank you. Councillor Bodley would like to vote to enact or move a motion to enact bylaws 19B and D and vote in favor.
Councillor Reeth, I second that motion and I vote in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Vassic in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favor.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too. That carries unanimously. Looking for a motion to adjourn, beginning with Ward 1, Ward 2, please.
Councillor Hanmer moves that we adjourn. And I vote in favor.
Councillor Bodley seconds the motion and votes in favor.
Councillor Reeth in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Vassic in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too. That carries unanimously. A lot of good work done over the day, or a lot of important work done over the day. And thank you all very much. And with that, sign off and enjoy the night.
Night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Night.